Before the Storm, War of the Submarine. Written by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Chapter 1. New Threats. 22 August 2037. In the Laccadive Sea. The submarine's hull had cracked open like an egg when it hit the bottom, leaving ample room for a school of rainbow runnerfish to swim through what used to be the control room. The chasm was big enough for divers, too, if a little dangerous, and macabre, for someone who drove submarines for a living. Alex Coleman was all right with that. As an experienced diver, he spent as much time as he could underwater outside a submarine, though he made an exception for this one. Going inside this submarine was a treat, not work. The old Kilo-class submarine lay on her side, the victim of an exploded battery that took out an airlock and personnel tube 3 years earlier at nearby Alderman's. Mercifully, the investigators removed the bodies long ago. The crew back aft in the engineering compartment even survived, thanks to a quick combined rescue force from Alderman's underwater depot and the Maldives. Critical equipment was gone too, either at the request of the Myanmar government or taken by scavengers stupid enough to think they could make it work again. Swimming forward, Alex eyed the watertight hatch at the back of the control room as 3 members of his dive group swam through it. No way was he dumb enough to go back there. Swimming in enclosed spaces was a good way to get trapped. Just last year, 2 inexperienced British tourists drowned in the crew quarters. Diving for 15 years taught Alex not to go places he might not come back from, so he stayed in the control room instead. After all, Kilo-class submarines might be old, but 9 world navies still used them, and most of them weren't very friendly with the United States. Seeing the inside of a Kilo was fascinating from a professional front, and it was a cool place to dive during his time off. After a few more minutes poking around, Alex headed back to the North Alderman's dive lock. Dying in some other country's submarine would be a really stupid way to go, and Alex's air was running low. He swam through the dive lock and into the transition pool, but when Alex breached the surface, Lieutenant Sue Grippo extended a towel to him with a scowl. Her uniform made her stand out among the civilians inside the transition area, even though Sue was wearing the standard Navy working uniform, or the Navy's version of casual. She had olive skin and dark eyes, with equally dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Sue was one of the best officers Alex had ever worked with, but right now, her face was creased with worry. "We've got trouble, XO," she said. And here I was thinking about going for a drink. Alex hauled himself out of the water and removed his fins. Who was it this time? Playtime was over. Time to return to being Lieutenant Commander Coleman, the executive officer of USS Kansas, SSN 810. Sighing, Alex ran his mind through a mental list of problem sailors, taking silent bets on who'd already pissed the locals off or otherwise managed to do a dirty. But Sue shook her head. "Not a who so much as a what. We got a flash tasker, and the captain sent me to get you pronto." Sue shrugged. "Sounds like some pirates are messing with underwater stations, so they want a sub to investigate." "Not here, I trust." Alex let his eyes sweep over the interior of the transition area. The pool was enormous and saltwater. The dive lock at the bottom led right out to the Laccadive Sea, which lay between India and the Maldives. However, 1 floor above this housed a busy and constantly growing resort, tucked in between dual gold mines and 4 oil-rich wells. Alderman's was one of the Indian Ocean's larger underwater stations, owned by an alliance of corporations based in the Maldives, India, and China. Security here was tight, tighter than on most Navy bases Alex had been based on. Imagining some 2-bit pirates stealing more than a pizza here was hard. You couldn't walk 6 feet without running into security. Even down here in the dive area, there were 6 visible cameras. And probably more cameras we can't see, he thought behind a smile. "No, sir. We've got more information on board," Sue replied. "I can take a hint." Fins off, Alex levered himself to his feet. I assume I've got time to change my clothes? Or do I have to run to the boat barefoot? Sue laughed. The captain didn't say it was that urgent, sir, but he did say we're getting underway in the morning. Good. I always like it when I get to keep my dignity. Chuckling, Alex waved Sue away as he headed toward the locker room. I'll meet you on the boat. 20 minutes later, Alex turned in his rented scuba gear. Storing pressurized tanks on a submarine was against Navy regs, and headed to the airlock connecting Kansas to Alderman's. He ignored the way a quartet of locals glared at him on his way by. One muttered something about American overreach, but they looked away when Alex eyed them back. He shook his head and headed for the boat. American popularity, or lack thereof, was not his problem. Mating an attack submarine to an underwater station was a new art. In fact, coming to Alderman's was only Alex's second time ever doing so. The first was back at Jack Black's, off the east coast of South Carolina, when Kansas's emergency diesel blew a bearing during training. Alderman's was shallow enough that Kansas sat on the bottom when connected to the station. Two rigid tubes held the pair together, joined at Kansas's forward and aft hatch. Both entrances were guarded by tired sailors who would have preferred to still be in one of Alderman's 3 bars instead of being on duty. Alex headed to the forward tunnel, nodding when the senior sailor there saluted him. Captain and Cobb are back on board already, sir, Chief Darcy Martell said. Thanks, Chief. Alex slipped into the tunnel, sealing the airlock behind himself and listening to the hiss while it pressurized. 15 seconds later, he stepped into the tube and put his game face on. Liberty was over. He was back to being the executive officer, or second in command, on board USS Kansas, one of the U.S. Navy's newest Virginia-class attack submarines. Kansas wasn't the newest boat in the rapidly expanding American Navy, but she was a good sub with a great crew. They trained hard, played hard, and now, a month into deployment to the Indian Ocean, they finally had a real job to do. Not that lurking around tracking Chinese nuclear submarines wasn't a real job. It was just that the Chinese boats were loud, and it wasn't much of a challenge. Kansas was ready for more. Dumping his stuff in his stateroom, Alex threw on a set of coveralls and went to the wardroom. Kansas's officers' mess was also their meeting place. Aside from the mess decks, it was the one place large enough to hold a meeting. In battle, not that the U.S. had engaged in a good old-fashioned submarine war since World War II, it also doubled as a tiny hospital. Commander William Rothberg waited for him. Rothberg looked more like a librarian than he did a warfighter, complete with the early balding and thick government-issue glasses. He also had a love of submarine food and a hatred of exercise that kept him a tad portly. But Rothberg was smart, competent, and, if rumor was right, going places. Alex was his captain's physical opposite, light-skinned, blonde-haired, and skinny enough that nobody would mistake him for some gunslinging warfighter either. They were of a height, which meant they were taller than Lieutenant Sue Grippo, who joined them before Alex could even greet his commanding officer. Glad you didn't get stuck in that submarine, Alex, Rothberg grinned. We've got another kilo to hunt, but this one's not on the bottom. Yet. Rothberg gestured both officers into chairs. Alex plopped down to his right. Pirates in a kilo? They steal it or buy it? Sounds like someone got Russian military surplus back in the day and then sold it. Rothberg shrugged. Who they bought it from isn't our concern. Finding them and stopping them is. Not that I mind the idea of hunting pirates, Captain, but isn't that usually a surface skimmer job? Alex cocked his head. It's not like we're going to go boarding them, or that we've got the space for prisoners if we do catch them. The very idea of trying to somehow connect Kansas with a smaller diesel submarine, like a Kilo-class boat, while underwater, was enough to make Alex's head spin. It'd be like mating a cat with a porcupine, just less efficient. The UN thinks we'll be stealthier, and 7th Fleet agrees, Rothberg said, referring to the fleet that owned U.S. Navy assets in the Indian Ocean. Ours is not the reason why. We just need to find these bastards and end them. Sue frowned. Captain? We've got a video of these gentlemen tearing through part of Victory Station, Rothberg scowled. Victory Station, in case you need to look it up because I did, is actually 7 different underwater hubs, each of which drills the shit out of oil. It's the world's biggest oil exporter, and you guessed it, the pirates stole a bunch of it, after killing 17 people. Killing? Sue blinked. I thought modern-day pirates held people for ransom. Apparently these yokels are cut from a different cloth. Here, watch. Rothberg brought a video up on the big screen covering the forward bulkhead. It was flanked by mementos of Kansas's various port visits. Not too many, since the boat was only 7 years old, and this just her second deployment. An assigned football from the Super Bowl-winning Kansas City Chiefs. The video flickered and then rolled into action, showing a crowd of people in a cramped space, muttering nervously. The blue cast to the lights told Alex they were underwater. He didn't know why every underwater station designer thought blue lights were chic, but the damn things were in vogue. The rush to the ocean floor might have opened up underwater real estate in a big way, but it hadn't made the landscape pretty, that was for sure. Stay back and nobody gets hurt, an accented voice shouted. Stay back! 2 figures to the right manipulated a fuel cross-connect. Alex remembered from his pre-deployment briefs that Victory Station Quatre was one of the 2 refineries in the 7-part underwater conglomerate. Are you done yet? A third figure asked. She was closer to the camera, tall and dark-haired. She wore a tank on her back, one Alex initially took for an air tank, but then he spotted the gun-like object in her hands. Oh shit, he whispered. 10 minutes, one of the guys transferring fuel replied. Glaring, the pirate leader turned back to the crowd. People pushed others. The muttering grew louder. Finally, one man pushed to the front. Look, we don't want trouble, but... Stay back! The pirate woman gestured with the flamethrower. The crowd pressed forward. Stay back! Someone shouted in French, another in a language Alex didn't recognize. The pirate woman didn't offer a 4th warning. She opened up with the flamethrower. Flames engulfed the crowd. Screams filled the air. The front line of terrified people tried to push back, but those behind them were slower to react. The front ranks couldn't get away. People went down, screaming, pleading, cursing. Bile rose in Alex's throat as those at the back of the crowd fled. He could imagine the smell of charred flesh in the recycled air on an underwater station, like people burning in a can. His stomach rolled. Rothberg cut the video. As you can see, these aren't your run-of-the-mill thieves. We think... A sharp knock interrupted the captain. Lieutenant Junior Grade Chris King, Kansas's assistant navigator, opened the wardroom door and stuck his head in. Sorry to interrupt, Captain, but there's a bunch of Marines here saying they have orders to come aboard. Marines? Alex echoed. Rothberg smiled. If we find these people, we're going to need muscle. 7th Fleet didn't say who they would send, but they did indicate someone was coming. I'd rather SEALs, Sue said. At least they know their way around a submarine. Every boat in the fleet worked with SEALs from time to time. The Navy's special warfare teams frequently swam on or off submarines for their missions. The relationship between SEALs and submariners was sometimes contentious and often awkward, but better the devil you knew. Alex had a bad feeling about this. I'll get them situated, sir, he said. As XO, the little details were his job. Everything was his problem, from where guests slept to the plan of the day. His eyes slid to the paused video before Alex could stop them. He made himself look away, trying not to think about 17 people burned to death. Shaking himself, Alex ducked out of the wardroom and made for the forward ladder. Going up that ladder to move sideways into the personnel tube always struck him as weird, but it was drier than swimming. Raised voices reached him before the airlock finished cycling to let Alex back into the station. "With all due respect, sir, without orders I can't let you on board or provide you with berthing." Lieutenant Penelope Juno was Kansas's supply officer, a tiny, red-haired firecracker under the best of circumstances. These were not the best circumstances. "Hey, if my printed orders aren't enough for you, Lieutenant, I'd be happy to call General Avila," a deep male voice replied. "Sir, printed orders can be faked." Tap, tap, tap. That was the sound of Penny's impatient foot against the steel floor of Alderman's. "We can only accept properly transmitted orders." "Lieutenant, my team and I didn't just spend 20 hours in a plane to turn around and go home." The airlock door slid open with a hiss. Alex strode out as the Marine Lieutenant Colonel facing Penny crossed his massive arms. The Marine dwarfed Penny by at least a foot, and he was twice as wide as her, too. 20 camouflage-wearing Marines stood behind him, carrying sea bags and rucksacks full of gear, along with weapons they probably didn't want Aldermans to know about. Kansas's pair of watchstanders were behind Penny, tensely aware that they were outnumbered and outgunned. Alex slipped between them, blinking when he caught sight of the senior Marine's face. "I should have known you'd be the one creating trouble, Paul." Alex crossed his arms. "Alex fucking Coleman," the giant rumbled. "If there was ever a submarine I wouldn't want to spend time on, it'd be yours." Alex cocked his head. "Will you even fit? With all this gear? Fuck if I know. You squids get to find somewhere to put it." Penny watched the pair warily, her eyes snapping back and forth. "XO, I still don't have orders for these guys." "It's all right, Suppo. I know this unfortunate example of a Marine officer." Alex grinned, turning back to Paul. "And I also know that he wouldn't be here for shits and giggles. He's going to hit his head on everything and use up Doc's stock of Band-Aids. He might be built like a gorilla, but he cries like a 3-year-old when he's hurt." "Damn right I am." Paul stepped forward to trap Alex in a bone-crushing hug. "Shit, it's good to see you, Rook buddy." "You too, asshole," Alex laughed, slapping his college roommate on the back. "Come on, let's get you and your people stowed. Then I'll start the betting pool on how many times you hit your head." "Is it too late to ask for another submarine?" Chapter 2. Old Friends. "If you weren't joking about that betting pool, you owe me a cut," Lieutenant Colonel Paul Swanson said a few hours later. "And why the hell am I in the top rack? I feel like a sardine." "You'd feel like a sardine wherever I put you," Alex replied from where he sat at the computer in his cramped stateroom. Space was at a premium in every submarine, even a large attack sub like Kansas. Cramming 29 Marines in, 2 of which were officers, meant that Alex got a roommate, which he didn't usually have. Tradition said the XO hosted the senior rider on a submarine. His luck said it was his college roommate and old friend. Random draw put rugby player and wannabe Special Forces Marine Paul Swanson and skinny nerd engineer Alex Coleman together during their freshman year at Norwich University. David and Goliath comparisons were quick to follow, but they didn't really line up. Paul was smart. Contrary to what people thought, the Marine Corps didn't let meatheads command battalions of recon Marines, and Alex wasn't a physical nincompoop. He just didn't lift barbells for fun. Nobody expected the pair to hit it off, or for them to continue rooming together for the next 4 years. Paul was with him when Alex almost got expelled for creating and exploding coffee creamer fireballs their senior year, and Alex dragged Paul back from a memorable encounter with midshipmen from the Coast Guard Academy before faces got broken and futures ruined. Conflicting career commitments kept them on opposite sides of the country for much of the last 15 years, until a handful of annoying pirates threw them back together. "The bottom rack looks bigger." Paul flipped to his stomach, scowling. "It's not," Alex rolled his eyes. And I sleep in that rack every day, so you can't have it. You're just here for a couple of weeks. Wah, wah, wah. All this being crammed into a metal tube with semen all the time must really ruin your sense of humor. Wow, I've never heard that one before. Okay, so I'm not at my best. It's weird down here, and this place wasn't built for people like me. Yeah, you're about a foot taller and 2 times wider than the average submariner, Alex chuckled. But you've been on a sub before, Paul. Remember our midshipman cruise? I hated it then, too. Please tell me there's somewhere I can work out. Same torpedo room your guys are sleeping in, yeah. The 2 women were in the tiny female berthing back aft, but the men were in Kansas's overflow berthing, which was the torpedo room. You don't even have a gym? Paul buried his face in the pillow. This is fucking uncivilized. You're one to talk, Junior Gorilla. Hey, I'm a full-blown gorilla these days, and proud of it. My arms are the size of your head. You can say that again. Congrats on making 05, by the way, Alex said. Lieutenant Colonel in the Marine Corps was the equivalent of a full commander in the Navy, 1 rank above Alex's. Thanks. You can't be far behind, are you? Selected. Got a couple of months before I put it on. Nancy's already got it, of course. What a shocker, Paul laughed. She's always been ahead of us, and never let either of us live it down. Nancy, Alex's wife, was also their classmate from Norwich University. Unlike Alex and Paul, who managed good enough grades to keep their scholarships and get commissioned as officers, Nancy was an overachiever from the get-go. She still was, too, hitting every career wicket ahead of Alex, and always ending up on top of the promotion lists. Alex was so damned proud of her. How are the girls? Paul asked, referring to Alex's daughters. Teenagers, Alex sighed. Pretty good ones, but don't tell them I said that. My lips are sealed. Unless they bribe me, of course. Uncle Paul is always susceptible to bribes. Alex snorted. Speaking of seals, how'd we end up with you guys? Farting about in submarines really isn't Recon's usual thing. The boys were busy, so they called up some real men. And women. Paul grinned. But don't you worry your little nerd ass. Pirates are pirates, no matter how far underwater they hide. We know how to deal with their asses. Give them one warning, and if they don't listen, we bring them back in body bags. Alex wasn't a fan of violence, but thinking about those 17 burned bodies, he had to agree. How's the roommate? Commander Rothberg asked during his and Alex's nightly sit-down. Same as always, Alex chuckled. Paul acts like a meathead, but he's got a pretty good brain. You know each other? Rothberg's eyes crinkled in amusement. Penny's already talking about your David and Goliath routine. Oh, please don't pin that moniker on us, sir. It got old at Norwich. You two go that far back? Yeah, we were roommates there, too. Some random algorithm in Jackman Hall probably thought it'd be funny. Alex shrugged. Joke's on them. Paul's one of the best friends I've ever had. He's damn competent, too. You don't need to worry about him getting the job done. He won't let us down. That's good to know. He's already got Penny spooked. He's a giant teddy bear whining about how small the top rack is, Alex said. Tell her to threaten to take his food away and she'll win every time. Rothberg laughed. I'll leave that one for my indefatigable XO. Good command training for you. Is that what they call it these days? There are still some mysteries of command you have yet to uncover, my young protege. Rothberg waved an airy hand. Charming shipriders and a good behavior while reassuring your supply officer is a delicate balance. But I feel you're up to the task. It's so nice to have your confidence, sir, Alex laughed. But speaking of tasks, Nav came to me earlier about MM2 Santos. It sounds like she's serious about cross-rating, and if so... You want to take her out, XO? Commander Rothberg asked the next morning in Kansas's control room. The small space was even more cramped than usual, with the addition of Paul Swanson, who took up more space than any 2 people combined. But Alex didn't have the heart to tell his old friend to leave, not with the way Paul watched, fascinated, as Kansas's sailors ran through the pre-underway checklist. Besides, watching him cram himself like a sardine into the corner by the fire control consoles was funny. Control, sometimes called the con, was the nerve center from which the submarine ran. Control stations lined the port, starboard, and forward bulkheads, each with dual monitors, one on top of the other. A touchscreen navigation table was in the middle, not far from the pilot seats up forward. Traditionalists still like to call those chairs the helm and plainsman. The Virginia class had revolutionized American submarine warfare in some ways, but some things never changed. The sub's navigation detail was manned, except for the topside, outside watches that they typically stationed when leaving port. Instead, they withdrew their personnel tube watchstanders inside the submarine and secured both forward and aft hatches. The submarine still sat in a cradle on the bottom, and the tubes remained attached. Otherwise, a shift in current could tip her right over. Theoretically, subs were weighted toward the bottoms of their keels to prevent that. It still hadn't stopped USS Kentucky, Kansas's slightly younger sister ship, from going belly up when departing Yankee Station back in 2033. It took salvage crews 3 days to free Kentucky's sail from Yankee Station's outer wall, and 9 people died in the flooding when the station was breached. Yeah, not a good day for the Navy. Rothberg, however, trusted Alex not to do the same sort of boneheaded thing that got Kentucky stuck to Yankee Station. "I'd love to, sir," Alex said. Rothberg grinned and leaned back against the nav table. "Then she's all yours." "XOI." Alex shoved his hands in his pockets and sucked in a deep breath. "Officer of the deck, are all stations manned and ready?" "Yes, sir," Sue replied. "Maneuvering reports ready to answer all bells." "Very well." Alex lifted his handheld radio. "Alderman Operations, this is Warship 810. Please retract your tubes. Over." "This is Alderman Operations, roger. Stand by for retraction, over." 810, roger. Alex tried not to hold his breath. This was the second most dangerous part of the evolution. With the tubes retracted, only the cradle held Kansas upright. He turned to Sue. "Stand by the outboard." "Stand by the outboard, OODI," she replied. Repeating commands back was a cornerstone of submarine life. It prevented misunderstandings, even in the heat of battle, and made sure the orders carried out were the ones intended. The nuclear Navy was especially particular about it. No U.S. Navy sub had ever had a reactor accident, and they aimed to keep it that way. Alex's radio crackled. 810, Alderman Operations. The tubes are retracted, over. "This is 810, roger, break. Flatten the cradle, over." "Alderman's Ops, roger, over." This was the danger point. If Kansas didn't get out of the cradle fast enough, or if Alderman's operations team was a touch slow telling them when it was flush with the ocean floor and could no longer support the submarine, Kansas could fall right over. At least 2 careers would go down the drain if that happened. Alex's for driving the boat into a civilian station, and Rothberg's for letting him. Kansas rocked slightly. 810, this is Ops. Cradle is flattened, over. "Ballast us up, Master Chief," Alex ordered. "Make your depth 200 feet. "Make my depth 200 feet, Cobb aye," Master Chief Chinadu Casey, the chief of the boat, replied. He was a Kansas old-timer, on board longer than Alex, and he knew his stuff. If there was one watchstander Alex didn't need to supervise, it was Casey. Alex left him to do his job. The depth gauge read 348 feet. Alex watched it and forced himself to wait. Kansas rocked again, buffeted by underwater currents. Then she rocked again, and finally, 347, 345, 340. How high were the sides of the cradle? Standard when flattened was 0, but who knew how good the maintenance at Alderman's was? Clipping aside on the way out was a surefire way to tip the boat over and go splat. 3:35. Train your outboard 050 at 1/2 speed, Alex ordered. Ahead 1/3, right full rudder. Outboard is 050 at 1/2, the chief of the watch replied immediately. Ahead 1/3, right full rudder aye, the young sailor at the helm said. Engines are ahead 1/3 for 5 knots. My rudder is right 30 degrees, no new course given. Alex let out the breath and heard it rattle in his chest as he felt Kansas lift off. Very well. The attack sub crept forward and laterally, with most of her motion to port. The right rudder moved her stern to the left, while the outboard, really a bow thruster, but no submariner called it that, moved her bow in the same direction. Ballasting lifted her out of the cradle, and the lateral motion took her away from Alderman's at the same time. Patience was the name of the game. The currents were pretty benign here. Kansas's GPS determined speed over ground was 3 knots sideways. Not bad. Range to station? Alex asked. 15 yards and opening, Sue replied. Very well. Alex let the boat creep sideways for another minute, another 100 yards, before ordering, secure and retract the outboard, rudder amidships. Nice driving, XO, Rothberg said, as Kansas's watchstanders obeyed the orders. I would have gotten impatient and kicked it up earlier, like I did back at Jack Black's when I almost hit the transfer tube. Alex chuckled. I think we can blame them for leaving it out, sir. Bullshit. Take the compliment, XO. I know you suck at that, but sometimes it's nice to be good at your job. Thank you, sir. Working for Rothberg was a pleasure. The captain gave him every chance to learn and prove himself. Before long, Alex hoped to have his own submarine, and he knew he owed Rothberg for helping him get there. Rothberg cleared his throat. All right, folks, while we work our way back into open ocean, let's talk about the mission. By now, everyone's seen the video of the animals we're after. They're driving an old Kilo-class submarine of the Russian vintage, so if we're lucky, it'll sink before they can hurt anyone else. However, if we aren't that fortunate, our job is to find them, catch them in the act, and then capture said submarine, preferably with the pirates alive to stand trial, though the UN hasn't yet determined which country gets to try them. Clear as mud? Everyone murmured assent. Alex spent more time watching their people than he did his captain. He already knew how Rothberg felt, but he saw the same anger and disgust mirrored on every face, Paul's included. If there was one thing every mariner could agree on, it was a mutual hatred of pirates. Pirates were the scum of the ocean and always had been. These just killed 17 people, and for what? Fuel? Money? There were 1,001 ways to get rich under the sea right now, and they chose the ones that included murder. Yeah, Alex was A-OK with chasing these guys, and so was the rest of Kansas's crew. Hell, he'd even hold Paul's hat while his roommate shot the bastards. Chapter 3. Popularity Contests. 24 August, 2037. The Indian Ocean. Paul tagged along for Alex's daily messing and berthing inspection, none too affectionately called heads and beds, the day after Kansas got underway. Alex could tell his roommate was antsy. The treadmill in the torpedo room was down for repairs, and even Paul could only lift so many free weights. He attended every meal on the boat, all 4 of them, and watched movies non-stop. But Paul wasn't built for sitting still. You guys get that clogged head fixed? Alex asked machinist's mate First Class Zeph Harding, the senior petty officer and berthing number 1. The berthing was a narrow space spanning Kansas's entire top deck. Racks, stacked 3 high, were aligned from port to starboard in narrow rows. Sailors called them coffin racks. They were barely big enough to flip over in because of the drawer hidden under the mattress. but a rack and a stand-up locker were the only places a sailor had to store belongings in this home away from home. Commander Rothberg was a tolerant captain who didn't mind when his sailors brought comforters and even rack curtains from home. One top rack had a Dallas Cowboys blanket, while the one below it had Star Wars curtains and a turtle-shaped pillow. Across from that was a rack decorated with video game posters, and another with comic book characters. "Yes, sir," Harding grinned. "Susie pulled a K-bar out of the bottom pipe." "Say what?" Paul's eyes bulged. He stood crookedly to fit between two racks by the lounge area, which featured 3 couches and a television. "People flush stupid shit and it clogs the CHT system," Alex said, turning to look at another sailor. "You keep the knife, Susie?" "You bet I did, XO," MM2 Jim Suzinski replied. "Disinfected it first. Good knife, mine now." Paul's jaw hung open for several long seconds. "You squids are weird." "This ain't nothing, Colonel," Susie said. "You should have seen what I found in—" Alex's radio crackled. "XO, OOD, we have tonals on a submerged kilo at 30,000 yards. His heart leaped. "On my way." Alex pointed a finger at the snickering machinist's mates. "You guys get a freebie this time. Don't waste it." Susie laughed. "No chance of that, sir." "Come on." Alex gestured for Paul to follow him, pretending he didn't hear his friend's sigh of relief when they squeezed out of the berthing compartment. "Fuck, how do people live in there? I might actually suffocate." Snickering, Alex swung onto the nearest down ladder, moving forward toward control. Most submariners have the sense not to get as jacked as you are. "With nothing to do but work out, I can't imagine why more of them don't." Paul rolled his eyes and took the ladder steps 2 at a time when it was his turn. "Nothing to do," says the shipwriter. "Hey, give me someone to shoot and I'll do plenty." Their bickering carried the pair to control, where Alex pulled the watertight door open and stepped through. Fortunately, Paul knew to dog the door down behind himself. Alex could ignore him and take in the tense atmosphere in the attack center. "Kilo Bears 079er, range 31,000 yards, Senior Chief Sally said from sonar. She wasn't on watch. Instead, she leaned over the operator's shoulders, watching the displays and wearing a spare headset. "Officer of the deck, come left to 079er at 10 knots, Rothberg ordered. "Let's creep up on this fellow until we have a positive ID." "Officer of the deck, aye." Lieutenant Sue Grippo turned to give orders to the helmsman as Alex went to the sonar corner, Paul on his heels. "How we looking, Senior?" he asked. "It's definitely a kilo, sir, but at over 15 nautical miles I can't tell you whose it is until we get a lot closer," Sally replied. "And there's a fuck ton of kilos out there, sir," Master Chief Casey, Kansas's chief of the boat, said from Sally's left. "Everyone and their drunk maiden aunt has one because Mother Russia is happy to sell them to you." "Is that how the pirates got one?" Paul asked. "Nah, probably the black market, sir," Casey said. "Even Russia ain't that dumb, or if they are, we'll never prove it." Casey sided up next to Sally to study the computer screen, frowning. The Master Chief was a sonar operator too, or had been before he crossed over to become a chief of the boat. The chief of the boat, or the cob, was the senior enlisted man or woman on a submarine. They were the epitome of a submariner, the highest an enlisted sailor could rise. And while Casey might be a tad rusty at sonar, there was nothing wrong with his brain. "You can't just lose a submarine," Paul frowned. "Can you?" "Sure you can, if you're the Russian Federation in the late 20th or early 21st century, Casey snorted. "List it for disposal, pay someone off, bam, fairy dust happens. The kilo vanishes into thin air. We don't know much about the boat these fuckers have, but if it came from Russia, it's probably a Project 877. That means the boat was commissioned between 1980 and 1995-ish, because the later boats are all accounted for. Those suckers do last forever, but they get louder as they get older, and we've got good sound profiles on pretty much all of them. As a bonus, because the Navy never throws anything out, the computer's still got profiles of supposedly decommissioned boats too, just in case." "You memorized all that for fun?" Paul asked. "Shit, Colonel, I memorized all that back in sonar school. I cut my teeth tracking these suckers when I was a kid, Casey laughed. They used to be considered fairly quiet, back before we got the new filters and computer programs. Back then, we could only bag them when they snorted. Now we've got a better chance of getting them while they're submerged, even when running on battery. What speed is this guy going? Alex asked. Around 17 knots, sir, Sally replied. Not the speed I'd go if I wanted to be stealthy, even in a diesel. Diesel? Paul repeated in an undertone. Subs come in 3 flavors of propulsion, Alex said. Nuclear-powered, like your lovely right here, or diesel-electric, like the older Kilos. They run on their batteries while submerged and recharge on the surface while snorkeling. Finally, we've got air-independent propulsion. AIP uses fuel cells or an electric motor while submerged instead of batteries, which is equally quiet but lasts a lot longer. The Kilos are all too old to be AIP, though. This cat's a diesel, which means he's on batteries. Running around at 17 knots is a good way to wear the battery down, not to mention get himself noticed, like you dropping trow on the UP freshman year. I could do without remembering that dare, thanks. Paul scratched his chin. Why not just drive on the surface? Modern subs aren't built for that. Giant metal tubes aren't really great in rough seas. You need a pointy hull for that, Alex said. World War II boats were designed to run fast on the surface and duck under to hunt the enemy. But now we do our best work underwater. Besides, radar can tag you on the surface. Can't sonar see you underwater? Only if you're good at it, sir. Casey exchanged a grin with Sally as she dialed commands into the computer. And these guys ain't. We're closing them at a combined speed of 22 knots, and they got no idea we're here. How do you know? Easy. A pirate sub, or another military sub, isn't going to keep coming at a warship. That's how accidents happen. Accidents with torpedoes. Captain, I have positive ID, Sally said. Computer profile has a 75% match to Kilo 182, owned by Vietnam. Her face twitched. Profile matches Project 636 across the board, sir. Very well. Rothberg didn't frown, but Alex heard the disappointment in his voice. Officer of the deck, come left and open the range. There's no need to antagonize an ally. OODI, Sue replied. Paul glanced around the control room, his eyes narrowing as he turned back to Alex. So that's it? We just go back to what we were doing? Yep. We head for Victory Station, and we get back to work. Yeah, this life of yours is super exciting. 27 August, 2037. Victory Station, Quatre, near Madagascar. 3 days later, Kansas pulled into Victory Station to investigate the pirate attacks. Immediately, they met resistance. First off, the boat got stuck all the way out on a transplat attached to Victory 1, which was the dingiest of the 7 hubs. Victory's operations team told Alex there was no undersea connection available, and relegated Kansas to an above-water transportation platform. While it made for an easier time driving in, an inconveniently long elevator ride awaited every sailor who needed to get to or from the submarine from down below. Also, since the pirate incident happened out in Victory 4, getting out there required a long boat ride with locals who didn't like them very much. Alex didn't speak a word of French, but he recognized at least one swear word, and he heard it multiple times while he and Paul were boated out to Victory 4 that morning. Paul shrugged. Ticked-off locals were nothing new. Remind me to tell you sometime about the rental car and the pier and roads, Alex said, mostly to pass the time. You mean that time you drove a fucking Jeep off the end of a pier in scuba gear because it was fully insured and the rental agency told you it covered absolutely everything? Paul laughed. Nancy told Janet, and she told me, you fucking legend. It seemed like a good idea at the time. One that might have gotten your ass kicked out of the Navy. Nah, a department head dared me to do it. Nobody wanted to take an admiral's son down with me. Alex grinned as the rundown platform for Victory Cathra approached. Man, it was rusty. The fueling connections looked like they were in good shape, but the rest of the pier really needed a coat of paint to replace the seagull shit. "Sometimes I wonder about your sanity," says the guy who jumps out of planes and chases terrorists for a living. Paul shook his head. "Gotta be safer than going to sea in a metal tube, dude." "Pretty sure the death rate for parachutists is a shit ton higher than it is for submariners," Alex replied as the boat bumped up against the pier. "We're here." "Thanks for the ride, man," Paul said to the boat's driver as they hopped out. That earned them both a half-hearted glare from their guide, a young man who'd barely spoken 3 words since accepting their charter. "Merci, monsieur." He sped the boat away. Scowling, Alex watched the rooster tail of spray kicked up by the boat. That was mighty welcoming of him. "Probably lumps us in with the terrorists. You note their fearless leader has a southern accent?" Paul asked. "Someone should tell him the U.S. is a big country." "Hell, you know as well as I do that people don't always care about that. Big, mean America and all that." "It's easier to hide from that shit on a submarine." Alex had encountered uneasy or even angry locals in many ports, though. Most times, people were welcoming of American dollars, if not American sailors. But some people didn't like the way a century of American policies shaped the world, and it showed. "Come on, let's get on with this so you can get back to hiding." Paul pulled Alex toward the elevator. He threw up his hands in mock protest. "Why did I agree to come with you? Didn't they issue you Marines for this shit?" "They're less fun to make fun of." They stepped into the orange elevator, and Alex eyed the peeling paint while Paul punched in their destination. It lurched into motion with an ominous creak. Alex tried not to cringe. He got stuck in an elevator during a snowstorm back at sub-school. Surely that took longer than this. Maybe. They bantered their way down, mainly so Alex could ignore the sheer engineering failure this elevator represented, and so Paul could pretend their destination wasn't near the bottom of the ocean. Victory Station was deeper than Alderman's. Victory Quatre sat in 600 feet of water, which made Paul twitchy. So Alex teased him about his disastrous junior ring ball date with Nancy's roommate Janet. That same Janet went on to marry the department head who dared Alex to drive a jeep off the pier in Rhodes years later. Back then, Paul tried so damned hard to make everything perfect. Wound up spilling red wine on Janet's blue dress and his own white uniform trousers, and broke the box for his own class rings. He ended the evening by falling off a chair, trying to sing along, badly, to a song by country singer Toby Keith. Recounting that disaster took them all the way to the bottom, where they were met by the promised local guide. "Commander Coleman and Colonel Swanson, I am Lydia North, the United Nations Special Envoy for Undersea Matters," she said. "I'm here to help with your investigation." Lydia was a slender woman, with dark hair going gray and thick glasses that kept sliding down her nose. Unlike their ride in, she didn't look displeased to see them. More like a harried administrator who had one too many spinning plates to manage. "Nice to meet you," Alex said, shaking her hand. Paul followed suit. "I can show you where the pirates struck, but I'm afraid it won't be beneficial," Lydia said. Her British accent was noticeable when she spoke. "They burned up all the evidence, and most of the bodies." Alex gulped back the need to puke. Going in that room was the last thing he wanted to do. But shit, that was the job. He hung back and let Paul take the lead. Paul was, presumably, good with dead bodies. Alex chose his career in part so he could avoid them. Alex knew Paul did some shady shit as a recon marine. He must have spent plenty of time around dead people. The stench hung in the room like a heavy curtain. Alex almost gagged when Lydia led them in. The bodies were gone, but damn, he could smell the burned flesh. Charred outlines of the dead remained like an epitaph on the floor. Damn, Paul didn't even flinch. "This is one of the station's main transfer facilities," Lydia said. "They brought a submarine up outside to transfer fuel out of the tanks." She gestured at a bank of valves and gauges, into their storage. "You saw the video?" "Yeah." Alex gulped back his nausea. "They made a hell of a mess." Paul stared at the burned floor, hands on his hips. "What's the point of terrorizing people? Couldn't they get what they wanted without a flamethrower?" Lydia shrugged. "The crowd was unruly. I suppose they felt threatened." "And bullets aren't such a great idea underwater." Alex examined the fuel transfer station. At least he knew what to do with this. The labels were in French, but valves were valves, even if the gauges were in kilograms instead of gallons. Poke a hole in the wrong thing down here and everyone drowns. "You're telling me that lighting things on fire is safer?" Paul gaped. "Less likely to cause a leak, sure. Steel takes time to melt." Alex glanced at Lydia. "How much fuel did they get?" "About 40,000 kilos, she replied. Alex did some quick math. "That's about 10,500 gallons. That's a lot of money." More math. "At current prices, that could net them, what, $40,000? "A bit more than that, yes." Paul frowned. "Isn't that a big tank to haul around on what you called a relatively small submarine?" "You didn't hear?" Lydia asked. "They also stole a Nake 3 submersible with exterior fuel tanks to carry their hull away." Further investigation proved worthless, only getting Alex and Paul heckled by locals. Lydia declined to translate what was said, even though they heard her speaking French with the station manager. That told Alex two things. It was ruder than rude, and there was probably a lot of swearing. "You know, I speak Spanish," Paul said, while they waited on the transplat for their boat ride to show up. "I could understand enough of that to know it was vile." Alex chuckled. "Get any good ideas from it?" It was getting hotter, and the lack of shelter on the platform meant Alex felt every inch of his exposed skin burning. Thank goodness he was in civvies and not a paper-thin uniform. "Only that the locals don't like us much." Paul crossed his arms. "You know, I'm used to not being the popular kid. The Marines don't usually send me and my boys and girls places where we're going to be adored. But I thought the French were our friends." "Me too. Must have missed that memo, or maybe it's just the folks out here." Alex shook his head. "It's double weird since they seem frosty with Ms. North, too. The Brits and French are in bed together on all kinds of naval technology." "Yeah? Their spec op guys don't like each other much." That was new information, but the only Special Forces people Alex really knew were SEALs. And Paul. Yet the Brit and French submariners he encountered seemed amicable enough. "Leaving so soon?" Lydia North approached from the dual elevator bank. Alex shrugged. "You've done most of the work and sent us your data. There's not much else to do other than try to find the, bastards before they strike again." "I'll be glad to help with that then." Her smile was smug. "I'll be coming with you. My superior just spoke to your captain, and it's been arranged." "It has?" Alex exchanged a glance with Paul, who looked like he was trying not to laugh. "Well, I guess then you'll get to share our ride. Watch out, he's really friendly." Chapter 4. Romance and Pizza. "Check it out," Paul said a couple of hours later, wolfing down his fifth slice of pizza in the wardroom. It was pizza and wings night, always popular on the boat, and doubly so with the very bored Marines. The media's got a hold of it. "Oh, fucking joy," Alex sighed. "Let me guess, they're using clip art of Errol Flynn and romanticizing piracy." "No Errol Flynn, but apparently they call themselves the Deep Sea Devils." For fuck's sake. Alex almost spat out his red bug juice, the unidentifiable but popular fruit juice available on every submarine. Really? Paul slid his tablet over so Alex could see the headline. Deep Sea Devils Attack Undersea Station. Aaron Steeple, New York Times. 27 August, 2037. 4 days ago, a group of pirates calling themselves the Deep Sea Devils attacked Victory Station, a majority French-owned station off the coast of Madagascar. After killing 17 people and stealing over 10,000 gallons of gasoline, the pirates evaded capture and remain at large. The grisly video of their attack was leaked online several hours after the attack and has gone viral despite Victory Station administrators' attempts to take it down. 17 grieving families must now deal with the fallout of that video. But who are these Deep Sea Devils? The Times received a message this morning purporting to be from the group. They claimed credit for 3 other thefts at other stations in the Indian Ocean: Riha-Akuru Underwater Towers, Osborne Station, and Olhu Valley Resort and Mining Consortium, where they allegedly kidnapped 3 major businessmen for ransom. The Times was able to confirm theft of 2 civilian submarines from Osborne Station, but confirmations of any actions against the other 2 stations are still pending. So far, the Deep Sea Devils have only communicated with the Times via email under a pseudonym. Facial recognition failed to identify any of them in the video from Victory Station. However, we know they are led by a woman with an apparent southern accent. If anyone has any information on these pirates, please contact the United Nations Undersea Emergency Office at undersea.emergency@unitednations.org or the Times at tips@nytimes.com. Well, that's a tin can of useless, topped with some salty press opportunism, isn't it? Alex rolled his eyes. But it's real nice that someone told us these assholes apparently hit 3 other stations before they got here. Yeah, it explains the locals' hatred. Paul glared at what was left of his second serving of wings. Aren't 2 of those stations right on top of this place? All of them are pretty close. Alex sat back in his chair, stomach churning and appetite lost. I wonder how many dead we're going to find from those 3 attacks. At least a few. Paul's expression didn't change, which made Alex queasy. I know the type, Alex. They're animals who don't value human life. They want what they want, and damn the consequences to everyone else. He bared his teeth. Until the consequences come to get them. Consequences in the person of you. And my team, yeah. You get us there, and we'll take care of business. Once we find them, they won't be hurting anyone again. I can promise you that. Kansas got underway from Victory Station just in time for Lydia to hear that the pirates hit Agalega Farmstead. We got a video of that too? Alex asked as he, Paul, and Lydia settled into the wardroom to look at the evidence. Unfortunately, no. Just a report from the station keeper. Lydia flipped through several messages on her tablet. She says that the pirates, who call themselves the Deep Sea Devils, and call their Kilo-class submarine Golden Hind, threatened to torpedo the farmstead if they didn't pay a ransom of 30,000 euros. Torpedoes? Where the hell would they get torpedoes? Alex frowned. Broke-dick old subs are cheap, but working torps are fucking expensive. Is there any evidence these fuckwits have torpedoes, or was it an empty threat? Better question, Paul said. Why use the name of one of the most famous privateer ships in history? Are they working for some government? Lydia's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. You know your history. I did a paper on Sir Francis Drake in college. I remember that. Alex resisted the urge to tell the story of how Paul selected said topic for their senior leadership paper just to piss off the executive officer of the Navy Department at Norwich University. Commander Bullerman was a prick and a submariner, which meant he liked Alex, but he thought Paul was an arrogant meathead who'd go nowhere. Paul turned in a meticulously researched paper that was 4 times longer than required to prove him wrong. It almost backfired when Bullerman tried to accuse Paul of plagiarism, because how could a rugby-playing numbnuts write something that good? Fortunately, Paul was proved innocent, and Bullerman wrote it off as a mistake. Meanwhile, Alex's mediocre paper on Mush Morton sailed right up to an A+ he probably didn't deserve. Fascinating, Lydia said in a tone that made it unclear if she was bored or thought it lovely that Paul knew some British history. Moving on. You seem to be correct about the lack of torpedoes, Commander, despite your, lovely language. When the station keeper called their bluff, the pirates, led by the same woman, forced their way onto the station and planted an improvised explosive device in an airlock. We do have video of that. Lydia played the video on the wardroom television. It was a little grainy, but it showed a team of 4 pirates attaching a homemade bomb to the inner door of an airlock. They were armed, 2 with flamethrowers, and 2 with what looked like knockoff AK-47s. I thought you said guns were a bad idea in a station, man, Paul said. They're still scary. Not that there's anyone to intimidate here. Alex glanced at Lydia and was met with a serene expression. Did anyone talk to them in person? No, it was all over the underwater telephone. Gertrude, I believe you call it? Yeah. You're wondering how I know so much about submarines, aren't you? My older sister is a submariner. She subjected me to too many tours over the years. A sigh. This is not how I intended to spend my summer, but apparently those skills come in useful. I hate to be that guy, but what happened to the IED? Paul said, speaking of useful skills and all. Did they leave it there? Alex gestured at the video where the pirates retreated into the outer airlock and into their own submarine. Golden Hind. How pretentious. They did, and the station keeper paid the ransom. Lydia pushed her glasses up as they slid down her nose. France is sending a team to defuse the device. France? Alex and Paul asked simultaneously. Yes, apparently one of their special forces teams was nearby in Mauritius for a training exercise. She pulled up a map on her tablet and cast it to the screen. While Agalega Farmstead is right off the Agalega Islands and not too far north of Victory Station, both the islands and the underwater farmstead owe allegiance to the government of Mauritius, which of course has French roots. Of course. Alex tried not to scowl. Geography wasn't his strongest subject, particularly when it came to who owned which piddly island in the Indian Ocean. Paul, however, was a world history nut who loved trivia. France still has some colonies in the area, right? Yes, Réunion and Tromelin Island are both in the area. There are others around Madagascar as well. The French Navy has strong ties in the area, as do their Marines. Of course they do. Everyone's carving out their slice of the pie out here. Going back to the pirates, Alex refused to call them by their stupid name. What else happened? Nothing. The station keeper paid up, and they left like the civilized people they pretend to be. She checked her tablet. Agalega's sensors tracked them moving northeast, but Lord knows how long that lasted. Still, it's a start. Alex twisted to look at the navigation repeater screen on the bulkhead behind him. There are 2 other big stations north of the Agalega Islands, Beach Lock and Quincy Mining Station, both majority owned by the Seychelles. Great beaches. Better casinos. Paul grinned. Don't get me started about you and casinos. Alex rolled his eyes. All right, in the absence of other information, we'll sprint and drift our way north, listening for kilos or the Nake 3 they stole. You think that's still tagging along? Lydia shook her head. There's a thriving black market for civilian submarines out here, particularly up off the coast of Somalia. Piracy may have dried up in that area, but the criminal element remains. There are a few stations out there that only deal in stolen goods, and God help you if you try to shut them down. Paul's eyes lit up. Sounds like fun. Easy there. I'll let you know when it's time to shoot someone. I do outrank you, you know. Paul flexed his muscles. And when did you, of all people, start acting like an adult? It had to happen to one of us when Nancy isn't around to keep us in line. Master Gunnery Sergeant Sarah Koshera was Paul Swanson's opposite in every way, excepting their sideways shared sense of humor. Now, Gunny, that wasn't very nice. Paul's voice barely hid his smile, and Alex saw laughter dancing in his eyes. We both know how rowdy Marines get, but I understand that mascots are important on submarines, and these fine folks are our hosts. We should give the dog back. With all due respect, sir, it ain't just a dog. Master Chief Casey paused to shoot a glare at Koshera. It's fucking Toto, and we need his ruby red slippers back too, or you won't be in Kansas anymore. Koshera groaned. Really? You went there? Gunny, you got no idea how low I'll go. As an E9, a Master Gunnery Sergeant was the equivalent of a Navy Master Chief Petty Officer, which put Casey and Koshera on even footing, accepting the fact that Casey, no giant himself, was a good 8 inches taller than Koshera. She was downright tiny, with dark hair, brown eyes, and a Napoleon complex that left Alex breathless. Koshera was the senior enlisted member of Paul's team, one of the first female recon Marines ever. And yeah, she was a nuclear missile on crack. Behave yourselves, children, Alex cut in. I know that the whole Marine versus sailor game is a time-honored tradition going back to the Revolution, but we are on the same side here. And I don't care how bored you are, Paul said. Give them back their mascot, Gunny. Honest to God, Colonel, I don't have it. Yeah, and I'm the Tooth Fairy, Alex said. You know who has it, so let's not split hairs. It might be a long underway, and guess what? Our cooks like Toto too. Hey, messing with our food should be off limits, sir. Koshera's eyes narrowed. It always is on the amphibs. That's the surface navy. Things are different on submarines. He's not pulling your leg, Gunny, Paul said. I've known this guy for almost 20 years. You wouldn't believe the crazy shit he did back at Norwich. You're a Norwich guy, sir? Koshera asked, cocking her head. It went without saying that more Marines knew about Norwich than Navy types. Norwich University was the oldest private military school in the country. While most of the officers it commissioned went into the Army, there was a healthy smattering of Marines in every class. A strong handful went into the Navy, and fewer still into submarines. Some of us wear our muscles inside our brains, Alex replied. Master Chief Casey made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. You gonna get our damned mascot, Gunny, or do I have to get the captain to do an unannounced torpedo loading drill that coincidentally ruins all your shit? You friendly folks are sleeping in the torpedo room, after all. Alex chuckled. Oh, that's dirty. I aim to please, XO. Pony up the puppy, Gunny, Paul said. I'll make it an order if you like. No need, sir. Koshera sighed. Give me a sec to pry it out of DeToro's hands, and I'll be right back. Alex wouldn't have thought such a tiny woman could stomp her way so vigorously through the hatch, but damn it if Koshera didn't. Yeah, he didn't really want to get on her bad side. He had a feeling Koshera knew 15 ways to tie him into a knot without getting creative. Which one was more dangerous? Alex didn't know. Paul might absently smash you into goo and apologize later. Koshera would probably kill you in your sleep. Chapter 5. Striking Close to Home. 29 August 2037. Approximately 100 nautical miles southeast of the Seychelles. Kansas spent 2 days on a fruitless hunt in the vicinity of the Seychelles, a tropical paradise with gorgeous beaches and numerous resort casinos. They were one of the most popular vacation spots in the Indian Ocean, as well as a favorite liberty port for Navy ships and submarines. Kansas was scheduled for a visit in September for their upcoming change of command, where a new captain would take over from Commander Rothberg. Alex looked forward to some sun and good snorkeling, and maybe going to a casino like an idiot with Paul, assuming he was still on board. But he had mixed feelings about the change of command. New captains were part of Navy life, but he'd miss Rothberg. I think I have a straight. Paul's brow scrunched up as he stared at the cards on the table between them in Alex's small stateroom. He sat in Alex's desk chair, making it creak in protest. It was evening in Kansas's current time zone, With their search for the pirates moving westward, they'd have to advance another hour tomorrow. For now, however, the search was routine and boring, which left Alex with time to tackle the challenge of teaching his roommate cribbage. There's no such thing as a straight in cribbage, dude. Then whatever the fuck those 4 numbers are in a row. Come on, can't you just tell me how many points it's worth? Alex stuck out his tongue. You said you wanted to learn what submariners did in our free time. I figured you watched movies or jacked off. Who plays cribbage in the 21st century? Paul sat back. I give up, this is ridiculous. Too complicated by half and way too much math. Hey, I like math. Yeah, that says a lot about why you guys like this game. Cribbage is a sub-tradition. The oldest boat in the fleet carries Dick O'Kane's cribbage board, and when that boat decommissions, they hand it on to the next oldest. Paul rolled his eyes. Is this where I'm supposed to know who? A sharp knock on the door cut him off. It's open. Lieutenant Sue Grippo opened the door. The first thing Alex noticed was that Sue's hair was thrown into a much messier bun than usual, and there were circles under her eyes. Flash traffic just came in, sir. Samar Station was attacked by the deep-sea devils. Samar? Alex jumped off his rack so fast he almost hit his knees on the table. When? 2 hours ago. Took them a bit to get comms back up. It sounds like they took a lot of damage, and they're still counting the dead. There wasn't much video from Samar Station, just news that got worse and worse while Kansas closed the range. What Lydia received from her contacts was brutal. An image of pirates connecting another improvised explosive device inside an airlock, and then another of the explosion. The airlock camera itself died in the blast, as did the ones just on the inside of the hatch. Alex watched the interior station video a half-dozen times, feeling sicker each time the wall of water rushed in on dozens of people as the alarms screamed. The feed always ended in static, and Samar Station's leadership didn't share much information beyond it, probably because they were still recovering bodies. Kansas needed 22 hours to reach Samar Station. They used the old technique of sprinting and drifting to make sure they didn't miss the pirates' kilo on the way. Alex hoped they'd stumble on the bastards while rushing to the station's aid, but luck wasn't with them, and they arrived around dinner time on 30 August. Again, Kansas was relegated to a transplant, but this time no one minded. Samar Station was state-of-the-art. Her transplants were almost as big, though not as numerous, as those on the famous Armistice Station down south. Every piece of equipment was in top-notch condition, and the berth assigned to Kansas was right by the elevators. Samar was American-owned, too, which meant security was tight and their welcome warm. Or at least it should have been. The pier was strangely quiet when Alex walked down the brow, the ramp connecting the deck of the submarine to the pier, with Paul. Normally, you'd see a couple of ships loading or unloading cargo and people moving about. But if there were more than a dozen people around, Alex couldn't see them. Feels like a murder scene, Paul whispered. You familiar with those? Not strictly speaking, no. I am not going to ask for details about that. Alex shook his head. Wonder where our husbanding agent is. You gonna stop speaking Navy and go back to English for us mere Marines, or do I have to guess what that is? Paul looked down into the water, frowning. Local who connects us with everything we need, paid for by the Navy. Alex shoved his hands in the pockets of his Navy working uniform and wondered if he should have changed into civilian clothes like they had on Victory Station. Nah, Samar was American-owned, and being in uniform was more likely to get cooperation. He hoped. Good, you're already here. Lydia North breezed down the brow, waving her hands. I've spoken to the station council, and they'll have someone meet us down on the terrace. Paul cocked his head. The terrace? The main floor, or deck, as you Navy types like to call it. Lydia sniffed and brushed past them. Come along, we've work to do, gentlemen. Alex grinned at Paul. At least now we're gentlemen. Though I'm not sure about you, you uncivilized beast. Keep calling me that, and I won't have my boys and girls shoot these pirates when they come after you, Rook brother. Paul's answering grin was all teeth. Sure you won't. They had to rush to catch up to Lydia at the elevators. How did she move so fast in heels? And why in the world did she bring heels and a business suit to an underwater station? Lord, this hurt Alex's head. Thank goodness the woman was smart, or he'd want to throw her overboard, via a torpedo tube. At least this elevator ride was free of ominous creaks and rusty hints at poor maintenance. Within minutes, the trio arrived on the main floor of Samar Mining Station. The mines themselves were on the ocean floor, but the bulk of Samar's business took place 2 decks above that on the terrace. Built like a bubble-encased shopping mall, the terrace was 2 decks of stores, restaurants, and every other necessity required by its rapidly growing population. Samar Station sat off the west coast of the part of the British Indian Ocean Territory known as Diego Garcia. Britain's last possession in the Indian Ocean was nowadays leased by the United States and housed a Navy base mainly used to supply ships and aircraft. The rush to the ocean floor and the increase in multiple navies' presence in the Indian Ocean meant the base at Diego Garcia grew by a factor of 5 in just the last 3 years, but it was still small. Not Samar Station. Samar Station sat on one of the world's biggest manganese deposits, which made the station founders rich. Manganese was one of the best oxidizing agents in the world. It was used commercially in rubber, glassmaking, fertilizers, batteries, and ceramics. But even more importantly, manganese was essential to steel production, and steel was needed for every underwater habitat. Even better, Samar Station was located less than 2 miles off Horsburgh in about 800 feet of water. That meant that the nearby naval forces on Diego Garcia were a significant deterrent to anyone who even thought about getting frisky. Until now. Damn, this place is bigger than I thought, Paul said as they stepped out of the elevator. Samar Station has a population of 12,000 people, Lydia said. It's not the biggest underwater habitat. That trophy still goes to Armistice Station, followed by Azure Outpost in the South China Sea, but still sizable. Impressive. Alex had to agree. It was funny how a submariner had so little experience with underwater stations. Alex knew how to avoid driving into one and how to hook a submarine up to one. Never much fun, but he hadn't spent much time at them. Bobby would love this place, he said to Paul. Paul chuckled. Thinking of your next family vacation? Maybe, assuming Nancy and I can line our leave up right. Being married to another naval officer complicated things as they rose in rank. Alex was damned proud to say his wife outranked him, and that she would soon take command of her own destroyer. But damn, it got hard to do anything as a family. Nancy's too smart to want to spend her vacation underwater. Paul glanced up at the overhead dome and shivered. It's pretty, but when I think about that giving way, particularly when a couple of ass nuggets popped explosives into this place, it gives me the creeps. Nancy likes novelties, Alex shrugged, his eyes tracing the dome. And I don't see damage around here, so the IED must not have breached the primary dome. Clearly, their airlocks had multiple redundancies. Any undersea architect with half a brain would design things that way, but 10 years of undersea accidents said designers weren't always that bright. I take it you two are old friends? Lydia asked as they passed a scuba gear shop Alex wished they had time to stop in. All the way back to the Wick, yeah, Paul said. The Wick? College. Alex didn't have time to explain Norwich University's strange nickname before 2 people approached. The taller of the pair was a woman with black hair and blue eyes. She had pale, angular features that made her look like she'd walked out of a teenager's vampire novel. The man was shorter and portly. He was dark-skinned and fair-haired, wearing an impish smile that reminded Alex of a naughty child. But it was the woman who spoke. Welcome to Samar Station. My name is Erica Ford. I'm a member of the station council. This is Tamar Beckett, my colleague. Tamar nodded. Hello, I wish we were welcoming you during a better time, but it is good to have help. We'll do what we can, Alex promised. I'm Lieutenant Commander Alex Coleman, Executive Officer, USS Kansas. This is Lieutenant Colonel Paul Swanson, commanding our Marine Detachment, and Ms. Lydia North from the United Nations. Lady North, technically. Lydia waved a hand. But that's unimportant. We spoke earlier, Erica. I hoped you might show us the damage. Most of it's inaccessible, but come this way and I'll show you what we can, Erica said. She led them past a surprisingly large supermarket, a mechanic's shop, and a water purification plant. Then they ducked through a watertight hatch into a smaller hallway, one that lacked the transparent domed ceiling. Here, Alex could see water damage. There was running rust on 2 walls and broken windows on multiple storefronts. 3 doors were ripped off their hinges, several benches were upended, and metal supports were bent. Repairs were in progress, but there was a lot left to do. As you can see, the watertight doors between this area and the next were open when the airlock was destroyed. Erica's stone-like expression screamed her grief. Everyone in this section of the station drowned. Lydia's gulp was audible. Don't you have automated safety features? We do, Tamar said, but they didn't account for a man-made explosion destroying both inner and outer airlock doors. The doors closed. He pointed at the large metal doors at the end of the hallway. But the area was already flooded and people were trapped inside. Our eductors couldn't dewater fast enough. Alex swallowed. Imagining the onrushing wall of water was easy. Anyone in its path would only have had seconds before it hit them. The impact might have knocked the lucky ones out, but the less fortunate drowned as the space filled with water. There was nowhere to go. The watertight doors behind them were closed, and opening those would doom the rest of the station, thousands of other people. How many died? Alex asked around the lump in his throat. 97. Erica's voice trembled. Damn, Paul whispered. Hell of a way to go. Yeah. Alex didn't mention that he sometimes dreamed of dying this way. Drowning or imploding were generally the submariner ways to go. Anyone who worked underwater accepted the risk of accidents happening. Yet the idea of pirates destroying an airlock to prove their mettle was unthinkable. We paid the ransom when they installed a second bomb, of course, Erica said. A second bomb? Paul spun around. Is it still there? No, they took it with them. That's a shame. My explosives gal could have told us a lot about them if they left it behind. Something tells me we're not going to be that lucky. Alex scrubbed his hand over his chin. Did the pirates say anything when you passed the ransom to them? Nothing. It was an electronic transaction. Tamar's shoulders slumped. You won't be able to help us much, will you? Paul shook his head, but Alex cut in. That depends. Diego Garcia has some underground hydrophones out this way. If they got a good snapshot of what these guys' specific kilo sounds like, we can track them. You want to say that in English? Paul asked. Every individual submarine has a few specific tells when you listen to them on passive sonar. The older a boat is, the more unique it gets, because as you repair equipment, it starts to sound different. So if these assholes got close to one of the hydrophone arrays, and they probably did, we should be able to dial them in. Then we can tell them apart from every other Kilo-class submarine in the world. I take it from your tone that there are a shit ton of them? From 12 different countries, and whoever those countries sold them to, yeah, Alex said. 5 of those countries are in this part of the world, and the last thing we want to do is the nautical equivalent of pulling over the wrong guy. That's rude, and if the sub belongs to another navy, it could start a war. Paul snorted. The world's got enough problems without adding a war to the list. Chapter 6. Hide and Seek. Senior Chief Sanelma Sally wasn't the most gifted sonar operator Alex ever worked with, but she was hard-working and conscientious. It took her less than an hour to pull up a comprehensive sonar profile on the pirate's submarine. "I got 'em, sir. If we can hear them, we can track them," she said, gesturing at the waterfall sonar displays in Kansas's control room. "Sounds like their low-pressure air compressor that should operate on the 60 Hz line has a weird tick, and it's running at 63 Hz instead. They've also got a weird vibe back aft. The computer is 99% positive it can differentiate this boat from every other Kilo submarine in the world." "Great job, Senior Chief," Alex grinned. "Black magic," Paul muttered. Sally laughed. "Just good hydrophones and computer programming, Colonel." "Witchcraft. Give me a gun and my own 2 eyeballs any day." Alex cocked his head. "Weren't you just telling me about how you guys are integrating drones into recon tactics?" "I can control a drone with a joystick, or my phone. None of this blind listening bullshit." "Guess we know why you became a Marine," Alex smirked. "If that means it's up to your smart ass to find these fucknuts in this great big ocean, I'm fine with that," Paul said. "So where do we start?" "That's the complicated part. We can't hear everywhere, so we've still got to guess where they'll be and beat them there. And as you said, it's a big-ass ocean out there." "Fan-fucking-tastic. So more hurry up and wait." "It's the name of the game." 2 September 2037, near Diego Garcia. "Still nothing on the search, Captain," Alex said as he ducked into Commander Rothberg's stateroom after 3 days searching for the pirate's submarine. "Even the new SOSUS lines near the base have nothing." Rothberg sighed. "I wish I was surprised, but it's still early." "That's going to be a shit explanation to the next station they hit." Alex slumped into a chair. "They're 3 for 3 without being stopped." "And if they continue on pattern, we'll see a 4th hit in the next day or so," Rothberg said. "The politicians are going to have a field day with this. They like to forget that searching the ocean isn't like a cop waiting on the side of the highway for speeders." "You want to deploy a couple of UVs to expand our search box?" Alex asked, referring to underwater unmanned vehicles. Kansas had 4 UUVs, pronounced UVs, tucked away in a back corner of her torpedo room. Most captains hated them and let the suckers gather dust. They took up space, reducing the sub's maximum capacity to 21 torpedoes instead of 25, and were a general nuisance. No one liked using them outside training because the high-tech unmanned vehicles liked to up and sink randomly. Sure, sometimes they extended your sonar picture. Sometimes, in perfect conditions, you could even use the onboard cameras to see things underwater. But usually the UVs dropped like a rock to the ocean floor, never to rise again. If you were lucky and the water was shallow enough, divers could pick them up like the marine equivalent of golf balls. Alex and Kansas's other rescue divers retrieved 2 of their UVs during training off the coast of Key West, but no way was that an experience he cared to repeat. The fuckers were heavy. Rothberg grimaced. "Probably the best plan. Pop a pair out and have them mow the lawn." "Mow the lawn, aye." Referring to that search pattern always made Alex smile. "Maybe our lawn mowers won't sink today." "Lord willing." "You really do this boring shit for a living?" Paul asked 18 hours later, squinting at the sonar screen over Senior Chief Sally's shoulder. He lost his fascination with sonar after about 5 minutes. Intellectually, Paul could understand how big the ocean was, but he wasn't good at waiting hours to get data. The top display was what the Navy called a waterfall display. To the uninitiated, it looked like green, squiggly lines on a screen, some fuzzier than others. Sonar operators, however, saw the sound gradient. Old-school sonar techs claimed all they needed was a waterfall display and a good set of headphones. However, the modern Navy also gave them a high-tech computer that synergized active and passive sonar inputs, calculating target motion analysis without old-fashioned maneuvering boards and charts. That display was on the bottom monitor, right next to the currently off video feed from the UVs. Toto, Kansas's stuffed terrier mascot, complete with his 4 custom-made ruby-red slippers, was back in his designated home, nestled between the top waterfall display and the monitor to its left. Yep, Alex suppressed a smile. Paul heaved a sigh. No wonder why you people play cribbage. This'd drive me insane within a week. So you're saying we're right on track? Oh, fuck you. Paul's grin took any sting out of his words. I'm so dragging you to the casino and winning buku bucks off your ass the next time you're back in Connecticut, dude. Alex laughed. Says the guy who can't count cards. Senior Chief Sally put her fingers in her ears and hummed. You know they kick you out for that, sir. Only if you get caught. He grinned and then elbowed Paul. Come on, you'll go crazy if we stand here any longer, and watching a sonar display doesn't make things happen any— They've hit another station, Commander, Lydia North said as she walked into Kansas's control room, her lips pursed and features pinched. She was all business, and her scowl promised a storm. Shit. Alex wished he was surprised. Where? Weeper's Undertow. It's up by Lockshore Weep, she added when Paul made a confused noise. This time they indulged in blackmail as well as thievery. They bullied protection money out of 17 businesses and beat the snot out of 4 people when they objected. Paul shifted slightly, the Joker gone, his eyes hard. Sounds like they need a date with my team. Anything else? Alex asked. Weeper's Undertow isn't busy enough to make protection money a good return. Right in one, Lydia grimaced. The station does, however, have a brisk trade in civilian submarine repair, which allowed our dear deep-sea devils to steal 4 civilian submarines. 4? Paul reared back. How the hell do you steal 4 submarines at the same time? They have to have a mothership. Alex waved a hand, his mind racing. Probably a surface ship, something with a well deck or a crane. Better question, what kind of boats did they steal? Lydia glanced down at her tablet. 1 Triton 3700, SDV 1200 hybrid submarine, a deep flight Super Falcon, and a Migaloo M4. Alex whistled. Damn. I presume that means something to you? Yeah, that Migaloo costs megabucks, millions, and not just one, he said. Way better than that hypothetical casino win of yours, Paul. Paul grimaced. So they made bank. Quite, Lydia said. Less blood this time, but more money. I fear they may have found their eventual operating model. Someone's got to notice when they try to sell those subs, Paul said. Lydia shook her head. Regretfully, no. There's a brisk black market for submarines in this part of the world. The only area worse is the South China Sea, and in nautical terms, that's practically next door. Great. So we gotta keep chasing them around the bad neighborhood, huh? Paul slumped against the bulkhead. That's what they pay us for, a new voice said. Commander Rothberg smiled crookedly. Pull in the UVs, and let's head to Weeper's Undertow, XO. Pull in the UV's eye. The response was automatic, but something nagged at him. Alex fought back a scowl, apparently without much success. Something wrong, XO? I feel like we're playing a blindfolded game of hide-and-seek. We might have their sonar signature on file, but we'll never catch them this way. Alex shoved his hands in his pockets, chewing his lower lip. We've got to break the paradigm somehow. Me and my peeps could pick a high-value station to camp on and hope they show up. Might make a nice ambush, Paul suggested. Rothberg shook his head. That won't help if they threaten the station from a standoff distance or sneak an IED on board without you seeing them. You could die of explosive decompression, too, and then where would we be? Paul grimaced. Pancaked. Your idea to use the UVs is a good one, XO, Rothberg said. If we fan them out as we approach, we might catch something. Only if they leave on the same vector we're coming in on. Alex shook his head. It's a big damned ocean, and they're playing us for fools. Unless the UN is going to cough up a much bigger search party, or we get lucky, there's no point in playing their game. Lydia shook her head. I've asked for additional resources. Every nation says their ships and submarines are too busy to create a new task force. Rothberg bristled. When did you do that? Yesterday. She met the captain's gaze. It wasn't worth mentioning after they said no. Rothberg's eyes narrowed. Alex held up one finger. Maybe Colonel Swanson's onto something. Maybe we ambush them. I thought that was a pancaking in the making, Paul said. Not if we bring them to us. We know what they want. It's not just blackmail or protection money. These guys are selling civilian subs on the black market. So we bait them into picking up the boat we want them to, where we have some friendly neighborhood Marines waiting to greet them. Alex grinned, and with Kansas nearby as backup, so they don't just sink the boat when they can't have it. That'd sure as shit ruin a perfectly good ambush, yeah, Paul said. Rothberg scratched his chin. That might work. Would the UN stretch to loaning us a high-end civilian submarine? Or renting one for us? Preferably a Migaloo or a deep flight, Alex said. They've already snatched up those, so we know they want them, and both sell for millions. Migaloos more so, particularly an M4 or M5. Lydia frowned. Perhaps. Are you certain this will work? No, Alex laughed. But it's got a lot higher chance of success than chasing these guys around like idiots. She squared her shoulders. Then I will go with you. What? Alex felt like the deck dropped out from under his feet. He twisted to stare at Lydia. You do know this is dangerous as hell, right? Like bullets in the face levels of dangerous. Not exactly the standard fare of Navy pirate chasing. We're going to let them catch us. And if I acquire you a submarine, Commander, it is my arse on the line if you lose it. So, I do think I will come along if it's all the same to you. Are you sure about that? Paul asked. My team will try to keep you safe, but I can't guarantee anything in combat. Quite sure. Have it your way. Paul met Alex's eyes, and Alex read his worry. Would this crazy Brit ruin everything, or just get in the way? No way did they want a civilian along. But the civilian was the money, so they were stuck with her. 6 September 2037. Samar Station, Indian Ocean. 3 days of haggling later, Lydia North scared up a Migaloo M8, a sexier version of the super expensive civilian submarine the pirates stole from Weeper's Undertow. A submersible super yacht, the M8 was almost 500 feet long, had a top speed of 15 knots submerged, and could carry up to 50 passengers and crew. It had air-independent propulsion, too, which was state-of-the-art for a non-nuclear powered submarine. The M8 could stay submerged for up to 4 weeks, and was big enough to carry 2 mini-subs of its own. It was so expensive, there wasn't even a list price online. Alex had to send Senior Chief Sally digging for one when he got curious. All she found was that the last M8 sold for more than $800 million. Yeah, this puppy will make a great payday for the deep-sea dipshits if they get their hands on it, Paul said. They stood together on Samar Station's number 1 transplat, looking over the Migaloo M8 submarine. It was gray and white instead of the flat black Alex was used to, with windows. Windows! And a sleek outline, complete with inverse bow and tumble-home hull. Alex scowled. She looks more like a Civil War ironclad than a submarine, or a Zumwalt-class cruiser. Paul laughed. And here I was going to say that she's pretty. Stick with your guns. He shoved his hands in his pockets, feeling weird to be out of uniform. But wearing a Navy uniform wouldn't exactly make him look like some civilian, would it? Instead, Alex wore the plain coveralls favored by civilian mariners, as did the 15 members of Kansas's crew accompanying him on this mission. Paul, on the other hand, was dressed like the rich owner who invited too many friends along for his joyride and had too much stuff. Crate after crate headed down the brow into the submarine, most labeled food, wine, or whiskey. Buried in with the goodies, disguised mostly as donuts and watermelons, were the Marines' weapons. Their other gear was in boxes of spare parts and ice cream. You got all your friends ready to go? Alex asked as the last 2 crates went down the Migaloo's forward hatch. Ready to rock and roll, baby, Paul grinned, rolling his shoulders to show off how well his silk shirt fit. They tried to put him in a suit, but Samar Station didn't exactly stock suits for men built like tanks. Everything was either too wide in the waist, or so narrow in the shoulders that one movement from Paul threatened to rip it in two. Then gather them up and we'll get underway within the hour. The one nice thing about civilian submarines was that they were designed to get moving a lot faster than a nuclear-powered boat like Kansas, and they needed way fewer people to run them. "You sure you can drive this thing?" Paul's smile never wavered, in case they were being watched, but his tone turned serious. "I looked in the cockpit, and it looks nothing like what you're used to." All submarines operate on the same basic principles, and I am capable of reading the operator's manual. Alex rolled his eyes, not mentioning that he'd spent most of yesterday doing just that. Sure, he'd rather learn in a simulator, but the Migaloo was designed to be simpler than Kansas. It wasn't like Alex was taking the civilian boat to war anyway. "All right then. Don't stand here thinking too long." Punching him lightly on the shoulder, Paul winked, and then headed over to his Marines, ushering his partygoers onto the Migaloo. Alex let out a long breath, and then walked over to Commander Rothberg, who also stood on the transplant pier about 20 feet away. Rothberg was also in civilian clothes, jeans, and a worn-out Chicago Bears t-shirt, just in case anyone was watching. "Ready for your first command, Alex?" Rothberg grinned. "I'm not sure this counts, sir." "Maybe not officially, but experience is experience, and you're ready for command. Not just of this mission, but of your own boat. I have every confidence in you." Thank you." He gulped. Knowing that Rothberg liked and respected him was one thing. This unsolicited compliment made him want to stutter. "Don't thank me. This is your crazy plan." Rothberg laughed. "I look forward to seeing how it works out." "Gee, that's a great vote of confidence." "I'll try not to let you get captured by pirates." Damn, that was a sobering thought. Being stuck in a civilian submarine with 21 Marines and 15 sailors was already an oil and water combination, but if the pirates had their way, it might all go up like a tinderbox. Nope, Alex had to trust Paul to take care of business when the chips fell. "Try not to follow too closely, sir," he said. "We don't want to scare them off." "The day a creaky old kilo can hear Kansas is the day I go shopping for a new career," Rothberg replied. "You sure you don't want to kick a lady north off? I'm sure the UN will get over her absence, and it's hard to vouch for her safety on board." "The lady's got the money, and she's hard to ignore." "I'm only joking. Besides, I already tried to talk her out of it and failed." Rothberg offered him a hand. "Fair winds and following seas, Alex." "Same to you, Captain." Alex headed for the Migaloo and didn't look back. Chapter 7. Party Time. "We need to name this bucket," Paul said 8 hours later, playing a game on the high-end tablet that came with the submarine. The Migaloo was well clear of Samar Station and headed northwest, roughly in the direction of Weeper's Undertow. Chugging along at a mere 10 knots, the civilian submarine wouldn't get anywhere fast, but Alex wasn't concerned with speed. He was concerned that the party boat vibe Paul's Marines had going back aft, complete with loud music and a set of drums someone snuck on board, would give him a headache. The noise was good since they wanted to be heard, but his teenage daughters were better behaved. Alex grimaced. "I veto whatever it is you're thinking of. Twice." "Come on, you act like I'm going to suggest Chesty Puller or Yellow Submarine." Paul twisted in his chair to put his feet up on the console. Alex watched but didn't comment. Paul wasn't dumb enough to put his size 14 shoes on something sensitive. Instead, he turned to Senior Chief Sally, who monitored the Migaloo's sensor array from the leftmost seat. "What do you think, Senior? Should we name this sweet little boat after a Marine no one other than jarheads remember these days?" Sir, I'd rather take a walk topside while submerged. Sally never took her eyes off the console, but Alex saw her smile. See? He cocked his head at Paul. You're outvoted. Pah, you squids have no sense of humor. How about Ranger? Sally frowned. After the aircraft carrier? Better than the Army type, Alex said. Am I the only one with an appreciation for history? Paul shoved a candy bar into his mouth. No, I was suggesting Ranger for Captain Benjamin Hornigold's ship. He was only one of the most famous pirate hunters of all time, though I suppose you could also reference John Paul Jones's ship from the early days of the Revolutionary War. Alex snorted. Nerd. That's actually kind of cool, sir, Sally said. Oh, now you're a traitor, senior? I see how it is. You were supposed to back me up against the jarhead. Sally's grin was lazy. I'm not sure which interaction of ours ever gave you that idea, sir. A few hours later, Lieutenant Sue Grippo relieved Alex in the cockpit. Why the civilians named a perfectly good control room after something that belonged in an aircraft, Alex didn't know, but he itched to tear the annoyingly bold-lettered sign on the door down. Instead, he took a walk. Familiarizing himself with the Migaloo, Ranger, he supposed, was harder than expected. Driving it was easy. A submarine was a submarine once you figured out the controls, but the high-tech luxury unnerved him. Everything was pretty. Shiny he could understand. Polished metal didn't rust or corrode. But artwork? Plush lounge chairs, giant windows, and 2 mosaic-covered jacuzzis? Compared to Kansas's utilitarian lines, with equipment and weapons shoved in every available corner, the Migaloo was another planet. Paul, oddly, was in his element. Alex never realized what a chameleon his old friend was. Maybe that was the Special Forces thing. Paul's spoiled rich guy persona hit every note and played it loud. He organized fake parties, loud music, and endless food buffets. The Marines and Alex's off-duty Kansas sailors drank non-alcoholic beer and pretended to be drunk, singing karaoke and hoping the pirates' kilo would pick up the sounds of partying. Someone howling out the lyrics to the Sideways' latest hit made Alex cringe. Any sonar operator with a set of ears within 20 miles would hear that. Better if bottom bounce conditions were good. You want to be heard, you fool, he reminded himself for the 40th time. Letting someone find his submarine went against 15 years of training. Alex shuddered. See a ghost, sir? Gunny Koshera asked from behind him. Alex jumped. Not until you showed up, but you might have just killed me from fright. No way, that's boring, she grinned, all teeth. I can think of way better ways to kill people. Much more fun for everyone. I'm not going to ask about that. Hey, you brought me along to kill pirates, sir. Koshera twirled like a vicious ballerina. Don't be sad because I'm good at my job. Sad is not the word I'd use. What are you doing anyway? I thought you'd be enjoying the party back aft. I'll join them when I'm done setting up Operation Scavenger Hunt, she replied, gesturing at the trunk on the deck behind her. Colonel wants us to hide weapons in all kinds of useful places, and I'm the most creative. Now that, I never doubted. Alex eyed the crate. You guys are using rubber bullets, right? Poking holes in the pressure hull is a really shit idea. We got the lecture already, Commander. Her smile was more natural. Finally. Probably word for word what you told the Colonel. Don't bust holes in the people space. Pretty much, yeah. No sweat. We don't want to die down here either. I'm okay with arranging for a couple of pirates to meet their maker, but I'm not going down in an underwater coffin, no matter how luxurious. Alex grinned. Now that's something we can agree on, Gunny. 9 September 2037, in the Northwest Indian Ocean. Scope's clear, Alex said as Ranger's periscope broke through the waves 3 days after they left Samar Station. He kept his hands steady on the controls, enjoying being able to drive the submarine. Enlisted sailors got to have all the fun driving warships, but the Migaloo was designed to run mostly by computer, except during critical operations like surfacing and diving. This one-man operation was so different from what he was used to. Like Kansas, the Migaloo had a camera array instead of a traditional periscope you put your eye up against. The display for it was on Alex's left. Advanced attack submarines needed multiple people to bring them to the surface, but Ranger had automated ballast controls, and from what Alex could tell, they worked pretty well. Surfaced. It was a pity the Navy couldn't figure out how to automate more systems. Alex supposed civilians didn't have to worry about battle damage. I still don't understand why this is necessary. Lydia crossed her arms, standing framed by the cockpit hatch. Trying to tell her to sit down was pointless, particularly because the 4 seats in the cockpit were filled with Alex, Paul, Sue Grippo, and Senior Chief Sally. 2.5 days of putzing about hasn't gotten us spotted, Alex shrugged. We'll make more noise on the surface, particularly if the Marines have their way. Oh, we will, Paul grinned. Gunny's got some special dance moves planned. Alex laughed. I'm so not asking about that. Yeah, probably better that you don't. Lydia cleared her throat. And we assume that this adolescent display will get us the desired attention? Beats chugging around down here with the whales. Alex dialed in a course and flipped the autopilot switch to on. And if they do have a mothership, which they pretty much have to, they're a whole lot more likely to spot us on the surface. This boat's not the quietest submarine in the water by a large margin, but surface ship sonar sucks, particularly on civilian ships. If they even have it, Sue added. And there's that. Lydia huffed. And what do we do if their submarine approaches? Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't catching that quarry the entire point of this operation? Kansas is still shadowing us, ma'am. Sue's expression was carefully blank. She's made for this. No way will they hear her, particularly with us making noise up here. If you say so, Lieutenant. Yeah, Sue's smile was strained. Alex made a mental note to ask her about her beef with Lydia when they were alone. Something was wrong here. All right, Alex said. We're stable on the surface, and I'm swapping to surface navigation. Someone needs to stay on watch in here at all times, but batteries release on the party topside. Paul grinned. On it. He vanished through the hatch with boyish glee. Lydia trailed on his heels, shaking her head like a disapproving schoolmaster. You might as well take your hair down, Sue. He flipped the autopilot on for a leisurely speed of 5 knots to nowhere, and made a show of putting his feet up. We're not supposed to look Navy. I'd say the same thing to Senior Sally, but her hair's shorter than mine. Sally laughed. Not my fault your hair's barely in regs, sir. Hey, close counts and horseshoes, hand grenades, and haircuts. Sue fidgeted. This doesn't feel weird to you, sir? Which part? Swanning about in wacko civilian luxury and waiting for pirates to attack us? Or is it the Marines grinding like horny teenagers back aft? Alex laughed. Seems perfectly normal to me. If you say so, XO. Alex pulled his feet down and sat up straight, turning to face Sue. Time to spill the beans, Nav. What's bothering you? I'm just not sure this is what I signed up for. Kansas is doing what attack subs are supposed to do, hunting bad guys, dropping off special forces, maybe doing a little spying. Sue bit her lip. But being bait while Kansas probably gets to shoot the pirates? I know it's necessary, but it feels, wrong. We didn't train to be bait, we trained to take the fight to the enemy. And hunting pirates is every naval officer's job. Yeah. Well, I could lie and tell you that there's nothing out of the ordinary going on, but one look at this palatial cockpit would prove me wrong, Alex said. So yeah, it's a bit weird. But we are doing our job, even if it's from a civilian submarine. And this kind of thing has deep roots in naval history, with disguised merchant ships being used to suck in enemies going all the way back to the 17th century. So you're saying that while we might be crazy, history will say it's normal? As far as I know, no one's ever done it with a submarine before. We get to be first with that. Oh, that makes me feel so much better, sir. Alex didn't mention that the victims of historical Q ships were generally submarines, particularly during the First World War. Paul was the all-around history nerd, but Alex enjoyed naval history. He dug back into the subject after coming up with this crazy idea. Q ships had limited success in wartime, despite being responsible for 10% of U-boat sinkings in World War I. Once the enemy caught on, they kept their distance and sank anything suspicious-looking. But this wasn't a war. The deep-sea devils weren't interested in sinking anyone. They wanted money, and to get the big bucks, you had to steal and sell the submarine. Hard to do that if it was on the bottom. Harder still to do it if the boat was full of Marines burning to mess your day up. Fishing, dude? Really? Paul joined Alex on Ranger's forward deck. He towered over where Alex sat, fishing pole in hand and far enough from the boisterous party back aft that he could pretend it wasn't happening. Migaloo's submarine called the main deck of their submarines the beach deck, and the boats were designed for surface entertainment almost as much as underwater. One deck up was the sun deck, with 2 hot tubs, lounge chairs, and a helo landing pad for the super rich, which they weren't. So the Marines set up a volleyball net and a barbecue, as well as using the surprisingly good waterproof topside speakers. Alex enjoyed sunbathing, water, and beaches as much as the next guy, but he preferred swimming to loud music and dancing. That led him forward to Ranger's bow and a deck down, which wasn't designed for partying, but was a good place to sit and fish. Sue had the watch for the next 3 hours, and Alex meant to enjoy the sunset. Beats your Marines' steel beach volleyball. Alex gestured aft and up, where a vicious 5-on-5 volleyball tournament waged. Someone's going to break their face diving for a ball. Hey, they're fit, not stupid. Paul plopped down next to him. Like the Marines, Paul was clad only in a bathing suit and his many tattoos, few of which, Alex suspected, were permitted by USMC regulations. Special rules, special forces. I trust them not to hurt themselves too much. It'd be a real shame to get taken over by pirates because our fearless protectors all smashed themselves to bits playing with a ball. You really have to worry about your sailors that much? Paul laughed. Marines know better than to... Clonk. Oh shit, Fernandez! Someone shouted. Splash. Alex's head snapped around. A Marine slid off the top deck, bounced off the beach deck with a sickening squish, and tumbled right into the water. Like most civilian submarines, Migaloos had life rails to use on the surface, but they didn't go all the way aft because of the helipad, and the Marine fell far enough back to avoid every safety feature. Alex's right hand jerked his radio up on its own. Nav XO, man overboard, starboard side. I say again, man overboard, starboard side. Fuck. Paul raced aft with Alex on his heels, fishing pole forgotten. Running on a steel deck, even one with artificial non-skid footing, was a challenge in flip-flops, but it wasn't like he had time to change. Ranger heeled outboard as Sue threw the sub into a starboard turn. Paul stumbled for balance, but Alex darted past him, his eyes on the water where Fernandez went overboard. Seconds counted down in Alex's head as the stern swung to port, away from where Fernandez should pop up. There he is! One of the other Marines shouted just as Alex reached the end of the beach deck. Fernandez bobbed to the surface, face half down and bleeding from the head. Shit. Paul skidded to a stop right behind him. Nowak, Tony, you two are our strongest swimmers. Get your asses down here. Those 2 rescue swimmers? Alex asked. No, but... Then no buts. He cut his friend off, raising his radio again. Nav, XO, man bear 095 relative, range approximately 50 yards. If you think we've got time to wait with Fernandez face down out there, you are crazy, Paul hissed in an undertone. No, I think the ocean will eat your Marines alive, particularly without fins, and I'm not up to rescuing 3 people today. Alex shoved the radio into Paul's hands. Keep giving Nav relative bearings and estimated distances. She's probably got him on camera by now, but live eyes have better depth perception. And throw me a fucking life ring when I get close enough, because swimming in open ocean without fins sucks. Alex chucked his flip-flops off and dove into the water before Paul could stop him. Damn, it was slow going. The water was around 80 degrees, so the lack of a wetsuit wasn't an immediate problem, but swimming in a t-shirt and board shorts wasn't Alex's thing. He was used to doing this in a wetsuit with fins, a mask, and a snorkel, and he hated getting salt water in his eyes. But Alex hadn't qualified as a rescue diver without being a strong swimmer, and the current was with him. He settled into a good pace right away, hampered only by the need to check Fernandez's location with every breath he took. Luckily, Fernandez landed only half face down, which meant he wasn't completely drowning when Alex reached him. Still, Alex wasted no time flipping the Marine on his back and doing a quick pulse check. Yeah, Fernandez's pulse was thready, but his breathing was touch and go. No way to fix that in the water. Treading water, Alex looked to see where Ranger was. The Migaloo was mid-circle, coming back around in a standard man-overboard maneuver toward where Alex held Fernandez's head and shoulders above the water. Fortunately, the sea was calm, for the tail end of monsoon season. Judging angles and distances, Alex started towing Fernandez to where he figured Sue would stop Ranger. Swimming all the way back to the boat was stupid, but training said she'd meet him halfway. That meant another few hundred yards swim, which wouldn't be too bad with fins, even with 2 to 4 foot waves. Hauling a Marine twice Alex's weight without them was much harder. His muscles burned with fatigue in minutes. Alex concentrated on counting strokes and keeping his rhythm steady and strong. Speed was not paramount. The sub could move faster than him, and rushing could get them both dead. A splash hit the water a few feet to Alex's right. He grabbed for the life ring without looking, hooking his free arm inside it and holding on tight. "Pull!" Paul's shout carried across the water. The Marines hauled in on the line, carrying them the last 25 feet. By then, some of the Kansas sailors had a dive ladder rigged over the side, and a rescue basket waiting in the water. Using the last of his energy, Alex heaved Fernandez into the metal litter and strapped him in. Usually, that was a 2-swimmer job, but both of Kansas's normal rescue divers remained on the boat, so he ignored his knotting muscles and got the job done. On Senior Chief Sally's command, the Kansas sailors hauled the litter up on deck, and Petty Officer Klusky, the corpsman attached to Paul's unit, since the USMC borrowed their medics from the Navy, started CPR. Hauling himself up the ladder felt like a Herculean task, but it beat treading water, so Alex forced himself up to the beach deck and flopped into a sitting position. Once he stopped moving, his legs hurt less. "Nav, Swanson, all on board," Paul said on the radio. Alex barely heard him over the pounding of his own heart. He'd acted without much thought, just done what needed to be done, but in hindsight, jumping off the deck of his first command, temporary or not, probably wasn't the best idea. But it wasn't like they brought another rescue swimmer along. Regulations required both of Kansas's 2 official swimmers to stay on the boat. Alex, like any qualified officer, was an off-the-books bonus. He maintained his qualifications for fun. No one really cared if the borrowed civilian submarine had a rescue swimmer, a fact that just almost cost Fernandez his life. Damn, that's harder without fins. "You're fucking crazy, you know that?" Paul loomed over him. Alex arched an eyebrow, peering up at him. "I'm the only qualified rescue swimmer on this boat. What the fuck did you think was going to happen?" "Rescue swimmer? I knew you liked diving and all, but that's a thing? And your thing?" "Subs get underway. People fall overboard sometimes. We like to be able to get them back. Drowning's bad for morale." Alex chuckled. "But we kinda like to plan things better, like having a swimmer standing by with fins and a wetsuit and all that good stuff." "You know what they say about plans." Paul grinned and offered him a hand, pulling Alex to his feet like he weighed nothing. I'll make a note to consider volleyball the enemy next time, yeah? Alex turned to where Klusky remained bent over a semi-conscious Sergeant Fernandez. How's he looking? Breathing and stable, sir. Best I can do for now. All right. Alex took a deep breath and glanced around at the worried faces of both sailors and Marines. I think we've had enough time topside for the moment. Let's stow the party supplies and get ready to dive. Aye, sir, most of the group murmured. Good call, Paul said quietly. Thanks, by the way. You saved Fernandez's life. I didn't expect you to go jumping in after him. Better me than you. You'd probably sink like a rock, and hauling your ass back would have been even less fun. Alex felt even smaller next to Paul right now, dripping wet and growing colder. Paul barked out a laugh. Yeah, that'd suck for both of us. More for you. I'd knock your ass out with an elbow to the face first. Bullshit. Nope, that's one of the first tricks they teach us, to deal with unruly rescues. But for you, I'd make it a special gift. Chapter 8. Bait. That was a very brave thing you did, Lydia North said from the cockpit doorway. Alex twisted in his seat, aching muscles screaming. I'm the only rescue swimmer on board. I wasn't about to let him drown, though next time I'd really rather do it in a wetsuit and fins. Do officers usually train as rescue swimmers in the U.S. Navy? Lydia pursed her lips. My understanding is that it isn't normal in the UK. Alex shrugged. Not usually, but my first boat had a hard time getting an enlisted sailor through the course, so I volunteered. I've kept my quals up ever since. It's not hard since I'm a recreational diver. Interesting. She blinked a few times, like she wanted to fidget and wouldn't. Everything all right? Yes, fine. Lydia's smile didn't reach her eyes. I simply assumed this mission would be faster. My superiors are not happy. He chuckled. They're not really sub-hunters, are they? No, politicians tend not to be. I'm not really acquainted with the breed, to be honest. Never really wanted to be. Alex was Navy through and through. The first in his family to graduate college, he scraped in on an NROTC scholarship, and then got into submarines through decent grades and hard work. Politics were something he didn't like and didn't want to understand. His older brother, Sam, sometimes told him about the politicking inherent in being a state policeman. It made Alex's head hurt. Even Navy-style politics didn't really start to get you until you made captain, or 06, and that was as far as Alex's ambition went. He wanted command of a submarine, 2 if he could get it, but someone else could be an admiral. Maybe his wife would do that. Commander Nancy Coleman was high-speed, smart, ambitious, and the love of his life. She was at the Surface Warfare Officer's Prospective Commanding Officer course right now. Soon, she'd embark on her first command, a shiny new O'Bannon-class destroyer. Nancy was usually one step ahead of Alex in their career progression, and he'd love to see her wearing stars. Provided she dealt with the politicians, and he never had to. Going into politics is a time-honored tradition in my family. Lydia's smile was wan. I wanted to be a nurse, but when my older sister stayed in the Royal Navy, the duty fell to me. Our father still thinks she'll come to her bloody senses someday. Alex laughed. I think I'd like your sister. She cocked her head. Perhaps you would. Lydia cleared her throat. However, I didn't come forward to discuss Ursula. As I said, my background is in nursing. I understand that Petty Officer Klusky is taking care of Sergeant Fernandez. I would like to offer my help. That's very kind of you. And a damned good idea, Alex couldn't say out loud. Klusky seemed like a good corpsman, but he needed to sleep, and nobody else had medical training beyond that of a first responder. Alex probably had the most from his rescue swimmer training, but he couldn't afford to get stuck playing nurse. We'd be very grateful if you're willing to help. Shall I head back aft then? Please, I'll let Colonel Swanson know. 11 hours of putt-putting around underwater later, The phone in Alex's cabin rang. He couldn't call the place a stateroom. It was way too plush for that, complete with a fluffy queen-sized bed that was too soft, a stereo system that could make his teenage daughters jealous, and 3 large-screen televisions showing the Migaloo's exterior camera views. The view was gorgeous, at least when they were shallow enough for light to filter down, but having windows in a submarine was just weird. Still, a long swim was always a great excuse for a nap, particularly after several hours on watch. By the time Alex finished his 6 hours in the cockpit, he was bone-tired, and his muscles alternated between aching and burning, so he ignored the too-soft mattress and passed out. He got 3 hours of sleep before the phone, belting out the tune of something Mozart, woke him up. It took 3 tries before Alex found the speaker button. There were no handsets on this luxury craft, oh no, just headsets and speakers. XO. He squinted at the clock before giving up. The dull pounding in his head told him too much salt water, not enough sleep. That was all he needed to know. Sir, it's the navigator. I think they found us. Alex sat up so fast his back cracked. Bingo, I'm on my way. Throwing on his all-too-civilian coveralls, Alex bolted for the cockpit, where Sue sat in the pilot's seat, her eyes riveted on the sonar display. 2 seconds on this overpriced boat taught the Navy crew that Migaloo brand sonar was crap. But there it was, plain as day, another submarine about 2 miles aft of them. Senior Chief Sally arrived right on his heels, slipping into the sensor operator's seat without a word. That left Sue in the driver's seat, with the captain's chair open for Alex. He didn't sit down. They've been creeping up on us slowly over the last couple hours, sir, Sue said. They probably don't think we've seen them, but they're so close that it's got to be our guys. Anything else is just bad manners. Yeah, they're pretty much asking us out on a date right now. Alex frowned at the plot. They say anything? Sue shook her head. Nope. Rude is the right word, Alex smiled wryly. I'm going to guess that contact up there is their mothership, huh? Definitely a surface ship moving at slow speed, sir. Senior Chief Sally frowned at her display. The sonar library here doesn't have military profiles in it, but it's a single-screw diesel paralleling our course. If I had to guess, I'd say it's an old amphibious ship some Navy or another sold off. Maybe Russian, maybe ours? Either way, it'll have a well deck where they can hide the subs they steal. Even ones this size? Sue asked. Might be a big fucking well deck. Alex chewed his lip for a moment before deciding that he could worry about that later. Let's wake up the Marines and then try talking to these guys. Way ahead of you, Rook buddy. Paul's voice came from the still-open hatch, but his grin was ruined by a yawn. Oh good, now that Sleeping Beauty is here, we can get to work. Alex winked at Sue, who snickered. Your team ready to rock and roll, Paul? We will be long before those yahoos can get over here. Then let's rig the trap. Remember, you're an offended rich dude until Kansas can bag their mothership, too. Be an affronted millionaire, Paul slapped Alex on the shoulder. Be careful up here. These assholes have proven willing to kill people who piss them off, so don't add yourselves to the list. Sue's sharp intake of breath made it hard not to twitch. Alex grimaced. We'll try not to. Get your ass in gear. One nod, and Paul was gone, leaving Alex, Sue, and Senior Chief Sally alone. This crazy plan of his suddenly felt real and insane. Who was he to go fishing for pirates as the bait? But they'd found the pirates. Surely that counted for something. Hunting pirates was every naval officer's duty, and these deep-sea devils weren't just people who stole ships for ransom. They'd killed people, innocent people. And for what? You want to drive, sir? Sue's voice was tiny. Nah, but I'll do the talking. Alex couldn't believe he was volunteering for this. He hated public speaking. But with his heart racing and mind focused, the idea of getting on the radio wasn't as awful as usual. You feeling okay, XO? Sue asked. Everybody on the boat knows how much you love attention. Alex shrugged. I just want to get on with this. Bracing himself, he picked up the handset for the Gertrude, or underwater telephone. A Gertrude was the only reliable way to talk from submarine to submarine, and it wasn't long-ranged. U.S. Navy submarines, and expensive civilian ones like this Migaloo, had communication wires that they could stream toward the surface to communicate with ships and aircraft above water. However, unless there was someone up there to relay, the best way to talk to someone else underwater was a Gertrude. Technology just hadn't gotten to the point of having easy and clear underwater communications. Not yet. Alex licked his lips. Hey, submarine near... He hesitated a touch too long before reading off the latitude and longitude, trying to come across like a civilian mariner who didn't rattle these things off in a military cadence. You're closing in on my position pretty quickly. Can I help you? Over? The response was immediate, from a woman whose southern drawl did not hide the edge in her voice. Migaloo M8 submarine, this is the Golden Hind. You are being commandeered. Surface and prepare to be boarded, or we will torpedo you. Over. Torpedo? Sue's jaw dropped. I thought Intel said they didn't have torpedoes. Alex made sure the radio wasn't transmitting before replying, I'm sure they don't, but we're scared civvies who don't know that. So let's just be scared, yeah? I'm more scared of them ramming us, sir. She gestured at the radar plot where the unknown submarine continued inching closer. Yeah, that's looking pretty fucking intimate, Alex chuckled. You think I waited long enough for them to assume we're freaking out over here? Probably. Clearing his throat, Alex lifted the radio microphone again. Did you say torpedoes? We don't want any of that. Then surface immediately. Over. Oh, they sound pissed. Alex didn't want to say he was enjoying himself, but man, thinking of the surprise waiting for these assholes was kind of nice. Sue chewed her lip. Might be time to listen, sir. Yep, let's do it. Alex slid into the captain's seat to punch in the correct commands on the dive control panel, easing Ranger toward the surface. He keyed the radio again. Golden Hind, this is Ranger. Surfacing now. Please don't shoot. Over. We won't if you hurry, Golden Hind replied. The utter lack of compassion in that voice made even Alex shiver a little, and his hands wanted to shake when he thumbed the transmitter off. Swapping to interior communications, he keyed the intra-sub intercom. All hands, stand by for surfacing. Expect visitors soon thereafter. Better strap in, sir, Senior Chief Sally said. Not a bad idea. Grimacing, Alex matched actions to words and buckled his seatbelt. 100 feet and rising, Sue said. Want to slow down and make it gentle, sir? Nope. Alex goosed the ballast controls, rocketing the sub upward. Ranger's nose breached the surface first, going a hair too fast, 10 knots, and then slammed down with enough force to slam all three sailors forward in their seats. They wheezed as their seatbelts jammed into their stomachs. The rest of the sub burst up in a great wave, rocking port to starboard and back again like a drunken whale. Alex's back cracked with the impact, and Sue swore as she struggled to keep the boat under control. Sally hissed, Jesus, sir? You think they're convinced it's amateur hour? Alex grinned. Shit, XO, I'm convinced, Sally scowled. I almost pity the Marines back aft. Alex unbuckled his seatbelt and rose. They're young and fit. They'll be fine. Pull up the cameras, will you, Sue? Cameras aye. Sue cast the deck camera views. There were 3 of them, onto the top monitors. A gray and blue hull, about a mile off their starboard bow, caught Alex's eye. Would you take a look at that? Points to sonar for guessing an old amphib. If that's not an old Austin-class LPD, I'm a pirate. Definitely an LPD, sir. Sue didn't sound amused. Her knuckles were white on the controls. Might want to stop sounding so Navy, ma'am, Sally said, reaching out to poke Sue gently in the shoulder. Unless you want them to figure us out in a hurry. That finally made Sue smile. Same to you, Senior. All right, ladies, we're casual from here on out, Alex interjected. Dial up 5 knots and let's see what happens. What happened was a boarding that took longer than a Navy crew would need, but was a lot faster than Alex expected. Within 10 minutes, Golden Hind was alongside their slow-moving civilian submarine, piloted expertly into a position to allow a boarding team to cross over from one boat to the other. The two hulls touched together with only a slight bump. These guys have definitely done this before, Alex muttered, watching the video. You'd barely know that from the rust on that kilo, Sue scowled. Following her gaze, Alex turned to the monitor showing the view of the Kilo-class submarine that the pirates named Golden Hind. The cameras on the Migaloo were pretty sweet. He was going to miss this level of technology when they went back to Kansas. But he sure as shit wouldn't miss the sight of armed pirates swarming a civilian submarine. That boat's probably as old as you are, he said around the sudden lump in his throat. Maybe older. Rust is the least of their worries. Why don't they use something they've stolen? Warships look more threatening. Here they come, Senior Chief Sally swallowed, gesturing at the camera showing 3 groups of pirates disappearing below decks. 4 of them, all armed with AK-47s and those damned flamethrowers, stayed on the beach deck, which Alex thought was a sensible, if regrettable, precaution. He glanced at the chart. Set the autopilot for 5 knots and stay on this course. Sweat beaded on the back of his neck, and his heart was racing. Why the hell had he come up with this insane plan? But his breathing was steady, and that was what mattered. Alex eyed the hatch and counted the seconds, making it to 67 before it cracked open to reveal the muzzle of an AK-47. Hands up! The woman with that thick southern accent shoved her way through the hatch. She had curly brown hair, blue eyes, and the kind of angelic face that made horny men do stupid things. We don't want trouble. Alex spoke for everyone. We're just here to drive. Don't worry, we're not after the hired help. She gestured with the rifle. Do us all a favor and step away from the controls. Sure, just tell us what you want and we'll do it. Alex didn't have to mime swallowing. His nerves were real, even if he felt like maybe he should be going to pieces and he wasn't. Nobody could be calm when 3 pirates, the last stayed outside the hatch, which was annoyingly smart, were pointing guns at them. The other 3 were all men, but the woman was in charge. Damn, the cockpit felt tiny with 3 pirates and 3 guns jammed inside. Alex tried not to fidget. His neck was stiff. Where's the owner? The chief pirate asked. Back aft somewhere. Alex tried to make his shrug look natural. It came off half convulsive. Maybe still drunk. Great. You 3 stay put and do as you're told, and everything will be just fine. Like I said, we're not into ransoming people. We just want the boat. She smiled. People are a nuisance. Oh, Sue's voice was a squeak. That's great to know. The woman laughed. Don't you worry your pretty little head. You want me to stay and watch them, Danielle? One of the men asked. Yeah, you and Roberto stay put. Pratik and I will go aft and join the others, Danielle replied. Fuck, Alex thought as Danielle and Pratik exited the cockpit, heading aft. He wanted to warn Paul that 2 more pirates were coming his way, but trying to use the intercom would probably earn him a quick case of dead. They didn't expect the pirates to keep them split up, hadn't planned for that. The assumption was always that the pirates would keep their prisoners together. What would happen when Paul and his Marines started shooting, but Alex, Sue, and Sally were still stuck in the cockpit? He kind of wished Gunny had hidden some weapons up here on her wacko scavenger hunt. Alex only shot twice a year to meet Navy qualifications. Sue and Sally did the same. Submariners weren't expected to be good with guns. Sweat trickled down his back as minutes ticked by. Alex watched the pirates, exchanging a worried glance with Sue. She looked like she wanted to curl up or lash out. Neither of them were trained for this. Interestingly, Senior Chief Sally seemed the calmest, but this was hardly her forte either. Damn, Alex wished he'd stuck with a conventional plan and found a way to torpedo these bastards. This has been Before the Storm, War of the Submarine. Written by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Copyright 2021 by R.G. Roberts. Production copyright by R.G. Roberts.